Well, there you go, Charles. Follow the yellow brick road. We should have come up with something other than maybe the yellow cake road.
That's right.
Doing some uranium-1 type deal there.
And of course, we're both and all in the crowdsource community to not figuratively hear that great song, Ding Dong, the Witch is Dead, but we can't play that one yet.
Not yet. We're waiting for that one to come to fruition. So, just getting all of our cameras back in gear. It's always such a... I've been writing to the company. Hopefully this issue will be resolved pretty soon. It's lovely to see you, Charles. How are you today?
It's a pleasure to be here, and this latest piece of work here is just outstanding. I mean,
Thank
it's
you.
on so many levels. Of course, we're aping The Wizard of Oz.
Right.
But we're dealing with a whole bunch of congenital liars. And you've got here, on the far left, appropriately, you've got Hillary Witch Clinton. And then you've got, what character is she playing there? She's the Scarecrow?
Scarecrow, yeah.
So she doesn't have a what?
No brain.
No
was what
brain.
the problem was with the Scarecrow.
Yeah. And then we have, of course, next to her, on her, it's on her left, our right, which is not likely that Barack Obama would be on our right.
B-Rock, everybody's least favorite 44th president.
And what is he's a scandal-free,
right, heart-free presidency.
and he doesn't have a what?
The Tin Man was looking for a heart.
And there, you know, we're going to talk about this in some depth, but you think about the worse than irony, the contrast of a gentleman who won the Nobel Peace Prize for doing absolutely nothing, and then has most recently won another Peace Prize.
That was
and
crazy.
you know, was callously, so this is not somebody who, as far as I know, who grew up drone striking people, you know, coming from a military background, taking great glee in picking drone strike targets around the world. You know, that's two-faced. Then next to him, on his left, you have, of course, a very flattering picture of Chelsea Diarrhea Clinton. I mean, who yesterday apparently she headlined a fundraiser for the NARAL, which is, I think, a very aggressive abortion rights thing. So she's very much stepped into the role of prime leader of the resistance movement, while, you know, hanging her hat. The only office I think she has is in the Clinton Foundation. So query, you know, how separate is Chelsea Clinton keeping her political activities, her partisan political activities, from this supposed tax-exempt organization?
Is that possibly not separate at all?
I think it's one and the same. And then you have, I mean, this picture of the liar in chief, I mean, is really, really good on so many different levels. So what the lion didn't have what?
Courage.
Courage, yeah.
He might want to put some ice on that.
It's not a laughing matter, I shouldn't laugh. But yeah, I mean, so the rubber has met the road here along the yellow brick road.
Actually, I don't think Bill Clinton uses rubbers, Charles.
Easy. So we got a family audience here. So, you know, this is really a tour de force. I wish you could put these together as posters. I mean, I think these are...
Well, you know what? I did identify a poster printing company. I need to follow up with them. I've been, you know, so busy coordinating everything and producing the shows each day and following up with people who call with new information and trying to filter out the signal from the noise that sometimes there are little things like this that slip through the cracks. So I will do my best to get the poster situation going. You know, people can order most of these items on mugs and t-shirts through redbubble.com, but admittedly there are some shortcomings to the interface on that site. It's very difficult to find things. I think it's a bit of a problem right now, Charles. There are all these resources available on the internet, but sometimes the user interface and the accessibility is not quite usable enough, and it's, you know, yeah, we've got videos and we've got all this stuff, but it's kind of everywhere. So bringing it all together in a cohesive, accessible way is maybe something that would help people.
I mean, for example, one thing that could be amusing is if you had the ability to circle through the poster, each of these, you set it up so that you could put it on one screen. You could have this up for 30 seconds.
Like a screensaver kind
and then
of thing?
another one would come up for 30 seconds, and it would rotate all through. This is now, I think, our 95th show.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be, and if it were done at random, I could show you how to do that, to quote, randomly select this off of this thing in Dublin, Ireland, that calculates random numbers using incoming cosmic wave particles.
What?
Yeah, it's kind of, even I can do it, so if I can do that,
Quinn
I'm
Michaels
hopeless
would love that.
I'm hopeless with that kind of stuff. But so you could rotate through all these things randomly.
Right.
You could you could pick them at random, and you could have them appear for a random number of seconds as well.
Right. I think most of our regular viewers know that we've created this repository of all the Charles Ortel is Closing In and the Sunday with Charles episodes. So this is our 95th show, and people can come in here and watch all of them. I won't play the clip from your amazing opening sequence with the last Sunday's show, but there's been some heat taken from our non-friends at CBS. This was so ridiculous, Charles. I think I had sent you the first message from YouTube saying that they were monetizing that video for CBS because of the opening with the Mission Impossible clips, but I think quite clearly that was fair use because it was a parody. We couldn't see any of the original actors' faces. We didn't use any of their voices. We didn't use any Mission Impossible logos, and it really could not reasonably be argued that clip could be mistaken for Mission Impossible, because we're making jokes and we're talking about Eric Braverman and everything. But I appealed to YouTube, and they literally said that they've sent the appeal to CBS, and CBS has decided that their claim is valid.
That sounds fair.
Yeah,
Totally fair.
It's really weird how YouTube arbitrarily puts out its rules and applies them one way for people like Alex Jones and Crowdsource the Truth, and perhaps another way for people who want to publish my personal phone number and do some of the various things that are quite clearly harassment. And it's very sad to me that YouTube is forcing people to, not be able to choose what they get to watch. It's really mostly up to YouTube.
Well, I think that's going to hurt them in two ways. And one way, I think it's going to invite the type of antitrust scrutiny that they have avoided to date. And the second way is that it may lead to a breakup of Alphabet, now Google and YouTube, into different ways, or even of YouTube itself.
Right.
And I hope Congress actually will use these recent developments, and the people on the left who used to be so terrified of monopolies, for good reason, seem to embrace these monopolies. This is fantastic,
You're right.
I mean, I wonder if it has any relationship between the amount of money that Google and Twitter and Facebook may send directly and indirectly to these candidates.
Yeah.
And politicians.
Well, and you and I may be jumping ahead here, but it's relevant to what we're discussing right now. You and I were talking earlier about how YouTube's latest little activity might in fact explode in their faces, because even though they've banned Alex Jones from YouTube and Facebook and Spotify, traffic to his website is exploding. So perhaps in the long run, this YouTube ban will help Alex Jones. And I mean, again, Charles, there's been a big push that I've been making lately towards Patreon and the shows that we've been doing that we're calling, only on Patreon. And I'm doing that in part because I need money to eat and stuff like that, but also so that people don't have to watch only what YouTube wants them to watch. I think that YouTube has very much used this sort of heroin dealer business model where they've given us this product for free for so long, and now everybody relies on it, and they can control what you see on there or what you don't see on there. So definitely people that want to take back control of what they watch can become sponsors of Crowdsource the Truth by going to patreon.com/crowdsource the truth, and then they can watch all of our shows irrespective of what happens to YouTube, but they can also enjoy some premium content that's not going to be available anywhere else.
Smart.
Yeah.
Good. So maybe we jump into the slides and
Yes, let's do that.
There we go.
Slides, the slides of lies.
So today we're going to be doing a slightly deeper dive. I love it.
Hard to believe.
Well, we're at a moment here where the Clinton Foundation and its trustees and executives, the significant donors, the professional firms, the people who are trying to cover up the fraud who remain from the Bush, Clinton, Obama years inside state, federal, and
Penitentiaries?
Well, not yet, sadly. They're all trying to resist this and resist exposure of this. And so when you take a project like this on, you can't do it, you shouldn't really be doing any project half-heartedly.
Right.
But in this case, you really do have to build up an intimidating arsenal of analysis, which is what we've tried to do. We recognize, and you see a little bit of it in the success, frankly, that Donald Trump is having, convincing a mass audience to reject accepted truth that really is falsehood disguised as truth and move in a different direction. You have to come at the problem from many different perspectives. You have to try to grab the people who care about the fraud in England, the people who care about the fraud in Canada, the people who care about HIV/AIDS, and all of them together, and then it sort of will begin to feed on itself. And then you have to drive this crowd, which I think you are doing so successfully with your Crowdsource the Truth.
Thank
you
you.
have to drive them towards the expectation that something is going to happen by November 15th, 2018. And what that's going to be is you got two bad choices. You can confess to charity fraud, pay the penalty, liquidate this thing, or you could file another set of false and materially misleading tax returns across the United States, around the world, and simply compound the pattern and practice of soliciting money, using the mail, using the internet, using television, using personal meetings across state lines, across national boundaries, when each request for money is a felony crime at state, federal, depending on the jurisdiction, international. So we're driving them towards this. We're going to increase, as Donald Trump's increasing his rallies, we're going to increase our presentations. We're going to take you down into reality that's been hidden, or that people have been trying to hide for so long. And then we're going to try to not just focus only on the Clinton Foundation. This is a much bigger problem. This is 30 years. It's a 30 years war, minimum, against, everyone in America, except for the top connected few. It's a 30 years war against the Constitution, basically. It's promoting
unregulated globalists versus the Constitution.
Versus nationalists. And there's nothing wrong with being a nationalist. There's a lot wrong, I should digress and say, there's a lot wrong with being, a Hispanic nationalist or a white nationalist or a black nationalist. That's wrong. But when you come to this country, and one of the great things about this country that people don't yet understand fully, who are out there resisting and anti-fying and whatever they're doing, they don't get that when you look around the world, there are very few other countries that can point to the successes that we have, not simply economically, not simply militarily, but in the arts and science and learning, writing, sports, you name it. There are very few countries out there where you can, from birth, you can grow up in adverse conditions, in humble circumstances, but if you figure out what it is that you're good at and avoid doing what you're truly bad at, you have a shot in this country of starting with negative nothing, less than nothing, and being, a billionaire if you want to be, a rock star if you want to be, a sports star if you want to be, a great writer, whatever. You have that, a business person, or just, minding your own business, drinking Chardonnay, walking in the woods in Westchester, and staying out of the political process, one would hope. So what we've been having here for 30 years of this, and it started with the Bush team, maybe it started before 30 years ago, but let's pick it up, when George H.W. Bush won the election in 2008, and then coasted back, 1988, and then coasted in, for, thankfully, a brief 4 years. And then it was compounded by the 8-year reign of terror of Bill Clinton. Yes, the economy improved, but we think about what happened, around the world in many places, and how that ended up culminating in the attacks that materialized on September 11th, 2001, when the warning signs were there for us all to see. Then W. Bush taking us into the wilderness with his, wars that nobody really thought through, in my opinion, as carefully as they should have been thought through. Then we enter the economic doldrums here in this country as good paying jobs are sucked out of the country by this unregulated globalism that allowed the cronies in the richer countries to pretend that their overseas factories that were selling products into the rich markets were actually complying with the equivalent of the strict laws that should protect the environment, should protect workers. They played this elaborate game. They covered up the failures of it by pushing interest rates down, which was sort of like putting a lot of extra frosting on a turd cake, basically.
What's the frosting on the turd cake made of, Charles?
Well, it would be good. It'd be sugar. You wouldn't taste the turd. So that's basically what happened.
Let them eat cake.
We've been fed one gigantic turd cake by these unregulated globalists.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, it's like, don't look over here. Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton are, in their 40s. They're very successful in theory, except that they're bankrupt financially. And they're in the White House, and they got to pay these bills, but they don't know how to pay these bills.
Why were they bankrupt if she's a lawyer and he was the governor? I mean, what are their expenses? They live in the White House. He's getting $400,000 a year to be the president.
Not 400. It was only, I think, 250 when he was there.
But even so, what the hell does the president have to pay for? All the food is paid for.
Well,
everywhere.
they got involved in all these crooked deals, and then they had to hire lawyers, and they didn't have the money for it, and and I would say, I don't know.
Defending rape is expensive.
Not just rape, also the other stuff. I mean, they had. I think at one point they had assert they had like $14 million of legal bills. That's a lot of. It's a big legal bills.
I know. Start a charity to pay for your criminal defense.
Right, exactly.
How is that not charitable?
Exactly, which is one of the things they did do. But you look at this and you say, how do these people,
grifters,
these grifters, go from that position, January 20th, 2001, to the present condition, where Chelsea, who's never earned an honest nickel in her life, as far as I can tell, is living in a $10 or $20 million apartment.
That's crazy.
How did she pay for that? And the Clintons have now 3 mansions. They've got the 2 in Chappaqua that are connected and the 1 in Washington, D.C. And we don't know, there are reports that there's property all over the world, in Dominican Republic, in Ireland, elsewhere, Panama even. And where did they get the money for all of this? And how come no one has ever taken a close look at the obvious elephant in the room, which is the Clinton Foundation? So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to take you through just how, when you go down now into the weeds, and some would say, Charles, please, not the weeds. That's what I thought you've been serving us in the 94 previous videos. But we're going to take you just a little bit more deeply so that it's crystal clear and obvious. And the reason we're doing it this way today, ladies and gentlemen around the world, is that investigators have sharpened their pencils and open up their pens and turn on their typewriters and computers, whatever, and they are looking at this. I don't know what that is.
Don't worry about that.
Okay.
People want me to get onto Discord, so it's just...
So that's what we're going to do, and if we could possibly get to the cover of the slide cover.
Yes.
Yeah. The other thing we're going to point out to you is, while we hear all the noise, today we've got some rally commemorating Charlottesville, we've got, I think, a march in D.C., we've got this, frankly, an idiot, Omarosa, with this book that was planned well in advance. We'll see how much truth lies behind this book. I doubt very much at all. So we've got a lot of noise as the deep state, which is very much threatened, and the Democrats and the Uniparty is very much threatened, as they look at this timeline.
The demon rats.
The demon rats, that's right. And their supporters in among the faculty lounge lizards that are out there, they see a clear path. I mean, to get this Omarosa book out, I don't know when it was finished, but there's a timeline involved. You figure out, I'm told, when you publish a book, you have to plan many months ahead. And so the insiders knew about this Omarosa book. They knew about the DC rally. They see a clear, end to the summer. They see this Kavanaugh fight on September 4th. They see the anniversary of September 11th. And they see an opportunity to serve a whole bunch of October surprises up to try to distract the voter and hand the House perhaps to the Democrats, and more importantly to the left-leaning Democrats, and maybe even, although I think it's a long shot, take control of the Senate, or at least get it to 50-50 in the Senate. That's what they're hoping for. They're whipping people up into a frenzy. Meanwhile, the Trump team every day is making conditions better and better economically, while admittedly stoking tensions around the world with rivals, let's just say, and some former rivals are being... Competitors are now showing their colors as maybe possibly being enemies, not simply rivals. So it is certainly a moment of high drama, and it's certainly been a wild ride so far since Donald Trump announced for president in, I guess, June, I think it was, of 2015. But it's a good moment, I think, for us to continue down this path of giving you all in the crowd a chance to see the details that we see the evidence that we see, think for yourselves, engage your minds, and then push these people to do the right thing, which is to take, sorry to use this analogy, but take the pants down of the various people around who are protecting this fraud and have been protecting it since October 23, 1997, to fully expose all the devious things, the deviant things that these people have been doing around the world, and crush this criminal conspiracy. That's something that we can do with the help of people in the crowd.
I think you should really put Bill Clinton in charge of exposing himself and taking his pants down and all that kind of thing. Now, Charles, CNN is calling this Omarosa book a stunning turnaround for former top aide. Are you remotely stunned that Omarosa would come out with a book, doing the things that this book is purported to do?
Not in the slightest. And I guess I have a certain amount of leniency when I think about the early period in most of these presidential administrations. The presidential candidates in the finals in the general election are chiefly focused on winning campaigns and giving speeches, and it's a little bit superstitious, I think. I can imagine people will look at it with superstition to start deciding way before the election exactly, what color the curtains are going to be and who's going to be working for what office and so I have a little bit of sympathy for the Trump team saying, let's not jinx ourselves, let's not act as if we won already. And then that gives you, from November 8th until January 20th, precious little time to fill a large number of positions. I wish that the president had not let a number of the people in who he did let in.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I've never tried to run anything remotely as big as the federal government.
Yeah.
And it's got to be a massive job, and you're going to make mistakes. And the question is, can you learn from those mistakes and move on and run it better in the future?
We'll hope that he can do that.
Yeah. So if we go to the next slide quickly, the disclaimer, welcome to those new subscribers and viewers. I think, Jason, you've got, what now, 60?
We're over 65,000, Charles.
That's right. That's good. So you divide that by 1,000, and it's a good reason to be over 65, which very few people who are over 65 can find good reasons to be over 65. That's really good. And thanks to the various people who are watching, and I think by word of mouth, referring this show and the Crowdsource the Truth platform to the wider audience. Experts in the advertising field will say that the best way to get to sell a product is via word of mouth, where somebody who likes a product says, hey, you really ought to check this thing out. A shout out to somebody, I will not say in what country they are, but there's something on Twitter, I think it's called La Fleur, F-L-E-U-R Productions, and the person behind that has put together, I believe, a very thorough site that takes basically everything connected to this Clinton Foundation fraud and puts it in one place and updates it and gives you access, not simply, Jason, to what you've done, which is monumental, but to other interviews and other reports, all in one place. And that's one example of the crowd sort of taking root. And we encourage people to understand that there are many things wrong in the United States. It's a big country, lots of things going on. One of the things that's truly excellent about the United States is you do have a First Amendment right in this country. And let us hope that we continue to retain that First Amendment right. You get the nitwit wing of the Demon Rat Party who's out there probably saying, I've heard these arguments otherwise, well, the First Amendment shouldn't, I'm not saying specifically somebody says that, but the First Amendment shouldn't really protect, this
Alex
show,
Jones. Yeah.
this show, because after all, back when when it was written, and I think it was not 1789, I think it was 1791, 2 or 3, something like that. 1791, 2 and 3, there wasn't any electricity. So obviously the founders didn't mean to protect this type of thing, because this is over the internet.
Right.
That's just rubbish.
Yeah.
So, I mean, when you look into the history of the First Amendment, on balance, these people who risked a lot to take on one of the most powerful countries in the world that was a little bit cheesed off, that the colonialists just said, yeah, we'll take this country. Why don't you just stay over there near London? Leave us alone. They risked a lot for that, and it really was crucially important that people have the right to say, within reason, you can't shout fire in a crowded theater, you can't incite violence, but you have the right, the clear right as in this country, to express your opinion and your views, and to suffer the consequences, not the negative consequences of being harmed, but of somebody listening to this show and saying, Ortel's an idiot. And so then we get into a debate about whether I'm an idiot or who's the real idiot, but it's through these types of interchanges, actually, over time, that societies learn and grow and science gets advanced. You have, everybody was saying, put Galileo to the stake, right? I mean, who was right? Who's laughing now in thinking about importance in history? And so I think the founders appreciated that. We certainly take great care to study what we're reporting on and analyzing, but we go the extra mile, and we'll continue to do this for as long as we're both involved, of showing you the hard evidence that we have. And if you see something that we missed, a perspective that maybe should be treated differently, please let us know. If we agree with you, we will, if we made a mistake, admit the mistake, we will change course. We like suggestions, we like your ideas, and we certainly appreciate the fact that so many people are now watching this and recommending it. And without any further ado...
Well, Charles, I have a bit of ado that I'd like to introduce, because people are absolutely blowing up the comments, not only on YouTube and Periscope, but also in Discord, which of course is available to Crowdsource the Truth sponsors. Everybody wants to know about this jet that showed up in Little Rock, and I know you'll be addressing it during today's presentation, but I just want the commenters to know that we had planned on bringing in Robin Gritz and Thomas Paine, but obviously Sunday people are busy. We will get more commentary from both of them, but there's been quite a bit already on True Pundit, of course, which Thomas Paine writes for and runs, and Robin has been tweeting about it, saying that it is highly irregular for an aircraft like that to be in Little Rock twice.
Right. So what happened is, and we'll be getting to this a bit later, what happened is that on, I think Thursday, the FBI issued a statement. We have a link to it later in the slides. We'll talk about it later, saying that actually this was all about rounding up a drug ring based in Little Rock that had been operating with impunity.
Tyson chicken? No. DEA investigated that many years ago.
And so the point is, when I look through the press release of the Justice Department on it, it doesn't ring true to me, because the size of the evidence obtained, the number of people on the team, would not appear to me to warrant sending a 757 in twice.
So you're saying that the press release from the Department of Justice doesn't ring true?
Well, yeah, the press release from the Department of Justice, it does not specifically say it's not about the Clinton Foundation. They just say, at this time, what we're doing is we're doing all these other things. So I would question why, if it's not about the Clinton Foundation, why a 757, if it was a 757, which is a large airplane, why it needed to go in twice in 2 days. I really question that. For the size and scale of the drug ring that was wound up, the number of people supposedly involved in it are pretty small, both the evidence and the number of people on the team. But,
And why a plane and not a truck or something?
I don't know. I mean, the arguments included that they were sending agents in. You know, it's a massive effort to go after this team, and so they needed to have a big plane to do all that. You know, maybe, but equally, one would hope, you know, that at this stage they opened the FBI investigation according to the original FBI investigation was opened in January of 2016, and then we have confirmation that one was reopened in January of 2018, an IRS investigation in July of 2016. The videos that I saw as the story was going on had FBI jackets and it had IRS jackets. Didn't mention DA, I didn't know if they're DEA jackets as well. So whatever's going on, something is happening in Little Rock. And let us hope that the people who've been on this team will see this program and the obvious frauds that are evident. That we're now going to we've taken you through it before, but we're going to take you into some finer detail. So if we could jump back into that, yeah. Indeed. So if we take this first link, this Yahoo, and boy, oh boy, is that appropriately named as a site.
Yeah.
A bunch of Yahoos. It used to be a good site.
Well, does anybody even use it for searches anymore? I mean, they're Yahoo News. It's like, what?
I don't use it for searches, but I do use it. Yahoo Finance is not bad. But here's this Boston Globe, which didn't the Boston Globe ultimately get sold for like $1 or something? The Boston Globe is not in particularly good shape. But here they're calling for a coordinated set of anti-Trump editorials this coming week.
What?
Yeah, they're saying that newspapers across the country should all go after Donald Trump for blasting the fake news. You know, I mean, guys, ladies, you're missing the point. You know, the reason your audience sucks and is declining is that your papers are expensive, everything is late. You know, whatever's published in print is late.
Compared to the internet.
You're singing in the main in the corporate-owned media from the same sheet of music.
Yeah.
Here's another example. You're going to gang tackle the president. You're all talking. You have this. There used to be something called Journalist, which was exposed as this left-leaning list of emails. People all go back and forth and they coordinate their stories. When you start homogenizing the news and sending it out to the public only from the left-leaning perspective, and demonstrate on a daily basis by your analysis absolute ignorance of basic arithmetic, business, investment logic, whatever, you're going to lose your audience to alternative media. And that's what's happening here. It's not Donald Trump. Donald Trump is very significant in this whole, obviously, leading a movement here, a popular movement. But if it hadn't been Donald Trump, it would have been somebody else coming along, looking at this mess, which is now crystal clear and obvious. So here are these newspapers coming together thinking they're really going to give everyone a black eye. I doubt that's going to work.
I tend to agree with you on that point.
And then we have, and I put this in angry red bold caps, overvalued, intolerant, globalist, venture-backed social media complex. It better panic, because I was going to do this maybe on Wednesday or maybe next week. When you look at the valuations of these social media complexes in the public market, they're absurdly high. And there is certainly an unequal distribution of the contributions of somebody, let's say, like Mark Zuckerberg, and the rewards that he has derived from his major shareholding position in this Facebook. Same at Twitter, same at many of these other places. And I don't think the public yet appreciates just how much the social media, venture capital-backed, principally Silicon Valley, California wing, this tiny sliver of America, how much they have exacerbated economic inequality by, on the one hand, reaping enormous fortunes for themselves, which are not fully taxed in many cases. In the old, before carried interest was eliminated, they were being taxed at better than anybody else, and most of their profits are in capital gains. They become multi-billionaires, and what are they doing? They're destroying jobs in this country. You think about the number of jobs lost versus, by the various consequences of what they're doing versus the few jobs gained. Then you look at the pay scheme inside these companies. I mean, these people, I think, have, like the Clintons, gotten away with bad behavior for way too long. And I think what they're doing by this behavior and by this chutzpah, frankly, is now igniting the type of real inquiry which is going to very quickly in Congress, in the Senate, and frankly around the world in the big media markets. People are going to start asking the tough questions like who decides at a Twitter and a Facebook, what's objectionable? How does that process really work? And if that's what they're doing, if they're serving a media function, why should Twitter and Facebook be able to get away with the argument that they're just a pipe, they're just a utility, they shouldn't have liability for censoring? No, that just doesn't get away with it. They're not going to get away with that.
I find it hilarious that Alex Jones is getting all this free publicity, and I mean, people who have never heard of him are going to be intrigued. Like, why is this guy getting banned and yet still growing? This is, again, they are like the coyote with the plunger, and the rock falls on their own head while Alex Jones goes running down the road.
Right, but then they go and they speak to the same group of people, and they're going to argue that the election of 2016 was obviously wrong because, who could have elected Donald Trump, and this Alex Jones was obviously wrong. I won't bring up the person's name, but I had a nice conversation this morning with an actual serious neurologist, who is just somebody I've met, who can categorically take you through and explain why some of this thinking, the in quotes thinking that you see out of these people is insanity. I mean, it is not objective thinking. It is minds are programmed to think down a certain path. Minds are programmed to reject evidence. Minds are programmed to reach the wrong conclusion. And they all talk to one another, and they all just think the rest of the world is crazy, not them.
I don't know if I brought this to your attention prior to right now, Charles, but I found this particularly objectionable. This is a tweet from a journalist, Ben Wittes, who I believe you're familiar with, talking about he rejects free speech.
Anxiety. I thought his original name was Benjamin Nitwitties.
And that's a better name for him.
And is he a journalist or a lawyer?
Well, he's...
you might want to let's see his Twitter and see what he actually is.
He's a liar, is what he is.
Brookings, editor-in-chief of Lawfare. I think, he's a lawyer.
Well, but the Lawfare blog, I mean, that's... Okay.
But I think his training is as a lawyer.
Okay, so he's doing blogging related to law, but I didn't realize he was the editor-in-chief. I knew he was involved with the Lawfare blog, and that's all very closely tied to the ongoing investigation that we've been doing into the strange death of Peter Smith. I lost my reply to him there, but I basically wrote back to him that, it's even worse. He's a lawyer with a journalistic sort of blog who's saying, Alex Jones doesn't need freedom of speech.
Well, see, it's for precisely, the founders envisaged Benjamin Nitwit, and they envisaged that type of person. We've had the quote out before of Thomas Jefferson, that people will hold themselves out above everybody else and decide that they can be a benevolent dictator. You see some of that in Mike Bloomberg's behavior. He views himself as forcing the soda ban.
Don't drink too much soda, Charles.
Exactly. Let's keep moving along here. This third link is the great, I'm going to embarrass her, but the great Clarice Feldman. And the big story that is suddenly becoming known here, and I think that Shifty Adam Schiff and Dopey James Comey and the crooked, I hope soon to be indicted Brennan, all don't want you to understand that this dossier and the circulation of it and this narrative about Trump is a creation of the deep state.
Yeah.
And where is it written that our tax dollars should go to fund this type of approach? Because it's not simply that it was a dossier; it's that it was a discredited dossier. They knew it was discredited. People who signed their names to the search warrant application before the court, they knew it was discredited. They had concerns about it, but they also knew they were in deep diarrhea.
Yeah.
And they had to come up with some way of possibly, stopping the riot that would come once Donald Trump actually got control of the levers of powers that he won fair and square in the election. They decided, oh no, we could stop this. The elections, those are for little people. When we rig them and lose, well, we just, invent this thing.
Make up a story.
We make up a story.
I'm a little cautious with that word discredited, because I think people like to throw it around, and once it gets stamped on something, it's like, oh, it's discredited, let's move on. It never had any credit to begin with. So
That's right.
It's never credited.
Right. Right, but anyway, the Clarice Feldman story is worth reading. We're not going to go through much of this stuff in great depth here, but we like to give people an update. The Manafort trial, I would say, is not going well.
Well, not for Robert Mueller. It's a little bit better for Paul Manafort than he would have thought.
It's surprising this is only 28 shares, actually, as I look at it, this particular story. But what happened apparently on Friday is that the trial was moving along, and then there was all of a sudden, everyone left the courtroom and the hurried conversations, and then it's been delayed. There's, on the one hand, been a suggestion that perhaps Mueller filed a complaint, or his team filed a complaint against the judge for his commentary appearing to belittle the prosecution, and they're trying to, set up a premise for an appeal. On the other hand, I wonder if this judge, who we're not going to mention the person's name, but a mutual friend of ours went to school with this judge and knows him well. I wonder if this judge is not one of these cut and dried dudes who says, all right, this case has nothing to do with collusion. So, please explain to me how, you are in this place where you're studying this. Show me the mandate that you received, original mandate, and prove to me why this has anything. Is this just fruit of the poison tree here? That this is all rubbish, and you're wasting time, and you're wasting money, and you've mattered a case, you're damaging this person's reputation. It may or may not be true, but you had no right to go down this path. And I wonder if this doesn't go so far as even getting dismissed. And I'm not a lawyer, but I'm just.
It would seem like Paul Manafort has a case for wrongful imprisonment. I mean, they've really trampled his rights in a way that is becoming troublingly common.
It has been common. I mean, So then I love this this tweet here from let's see, this is from Mark Levin.
Yeah, he's good.
Bill Kristol is, what did he say? He's trying to Levin had dinner with the president, and Trump then started saying that Mueller is more of a threat to the republic than Putin. And so this idiot, and Bill Kristol really should just shut the F up at this point. I mean, back in the day I used to enjoy him many years ago on Fox, but he's gone completely loco. He's a ardent never Trumper. His father was very famous. This guy was, I believe, chief of staff to, who was that vice president of HW?
HW? Oh, Dan Quayle?
Yeah, he was Dan Quayle's chief of staff. He's that good.
Can't spell potato.
Right. So and this guy is trying to pick a fight. So here's Levin's response. Billy Kristol, I speak for myself. He's obviously getting you to think about the great comedian.
Yeah.
Would you like to come on my radio show and debate the constitutional issues related to Mueller's activities? If not, stick it, which is exactly what you have to do with this guy, Kristol. I mean, he should just stick it. He should just, go back, go to school, learn about investments, learn about economics, understand what's really happening, and, show some repentance for his behavior.
This is problematic that people seem to be pushing this idea that the FBI should be above any kind of criticism or scrutiny. Like he says, oh, the president is attacking the FBI. Well, the FBI has colluded to break the law. The top management of the FBI has been infiltrated by criminals. They need to be attacked.
Right, exactly. And it's not we didn't elect Bill Kristol, president.
Right.
We didn't even accept him as, a clown.
What happened to Dan Quayle?
He's probably playing golf.
You remember that Conan O'Brien monologue where when H.W. Bush had staged a parachute jump to his presidential library for his 80th birthday, Conan O'Brien commented that Dan Quayle said, "That's absolutely crazy. I would never go near a library."
Well, so here, this next tweet down here, this Kavanaugh one.
This one?
No.
Sorry, Kavanaugh. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well,
Whoops, no, it's all right. We go back.
Yeah.
Which one?
Sorry. Yeah, the President Trump. This is a.
That's the same one. Sorry.
That's right.
Why am I getting so tripped up here? President Trump is raising pressure on the legacy FBI, right?
Yeah. Now, this is driving people crazy. This came out, I guess, yesterday morning. And there are people saying, how would Donald Trump dare to get involved in trying to get these McCabe text messages? Where is it written that, at this stage, McCabe is out, right?
Yeah, he's
Where
been
is it
fired.
written that there's any reason to keep these text messages of a disgraced and fired, and I hope indicted and convicted criminal?
Yeah.
Why are people protecting these text messages? It's probably not because they make Trump look really, really bad. It's probably because they make Obama and Comey and Brennan and many others look,
and McCabe
look super, super bad. Now, these are supposed to have been turned over to Tom Fitton. I think he's the one trying to get them.
Right.
And they're holding back. And I think Donald Trump is absolutely right to stand up and say, this whole idea that chiefly it's the advisors in a firm, the middle level, senior level managers and advisors and professional people around a CEO, they all like to say, we're so indispensable, you really shouldn't be doing that thing, Mr. President or Mr. CEO, without us. I mean, if you go down that path without checking with us,
right.
That's not the way Donald Trump thinks. He's the President of the United States. He is entitled, he makes the tough calls.
Yeah.
He's watched this, he's been, in my view, too patient.
Yeah.
He should be taking off his whatever size shoes he has and pounding the goddamn cabinet table and saying, if I don't see these messages, in Tom Fitton's house or office or wherever he wants them by 3:30 p.m. today, this shoe is not going to be landing on the table.
I think we should commend Tom Fitton and Judicial Watch. They're doing very good work, and I know my good friend Larry Klayman doesn't have the best relationship with them, but I think that Judicial Watch is doing important work and deserves people's support and encouragement.
Absolutely. Every week, they're doing the work of, I think the way it works is Judicial Watch is doing such a good job that the people in the Department of Justice are saying, why should we work? We'll let Tom Fitton do all this. We'll pretend we're working. We'll go to conferences. We'll do this. We'll do that.
Well, but this kind of pressure, it's important to keep it on because we need these documents, and they're going to support other efforts. And if Tom wasn't pushing for it, obviously, maybe Trump wouldn't even know about it. I mean, they've brought out a lot of documents.
It's fantastic work. And Micah Morrison, I think, is the top investigator. He's a great guy. This one here, we learned recently from Mark Meadows. This is his tweet that Bruce Orr, I guess without his wife, or as Trump says, his beautiful wife.
Does he say that?
He did say he's getting in a certain amount of trouble for saying that. But
I guess he's trying to be complimentary, right?
August 28th, though, in dog days of summer, there's supposed to be a meeting in Congress. I thought the House was out.
No, they said they were giving up their summer vacation at Trump's behest to...
Okay. What about the Senate, though? Is the Senate out?
I was shocked to hear it. We'd have to go back and look, but I was like, I remember when he called for it, and I remember thinking, there's no way. They don't actually work.
Well, August 28th, I remember long time ago, quite a long time ago, I was in a tennis tournament in this national tournament in Washington, D.C., just around August 28th. And I could tell you, from the memory of playing tennis.
It's got to be hot.
Not only is it boiling hot, but back then there were tons and tons of mosquitoes. So you're drenched in sweat.
Why are there less mosquitoes now?
Probably the
sprays.
The sprays for so long.
Cancer instead.
But it was, the Roundup problem. But, it was just misery. And we're talking, I think this was 1972.
Wow.
It was really, so they call Bruce Orr. He's used to living in the swamp. He's very comfortable as a swamp rat in chief.
Yeah.
But I think it's fantastic that they're going to bring him. I hope they bring many other people to Congress. And here he says he owes the American public the truth. I hope this will be the full truth. This will be a public hearing, I hope.
I hope so too, Charles. It's very shocking to me that, there's been all these things that have been investigations into the death of Vince Foster, et cetera, all these things that people have, had questions about. These relationships between Bruce Orr and Christopher Steele, the whole thing is so
crooked.
alarmingly obvious. I don't understand people that can still be saying, "Oh, well, but people are getting indicted. Russia did whatever."
Right. Well, I mean, the thing of it is, the people at the top of this criminal conspiracy figured out that there are actually a very limited number of chairs that need to be filled, that will deflect. You can have the
To control a
to
story.
control. Yeah, you can elect a Republican, and you just fill the key seats with people who say, "Oh yeah, I'm nonpartisan. Give all my money to the Democratic Party, but I'm nonpartisan. I don't vote." So they figured that out, and they had a long period of time here. 30 years, I would argue. Bush, Clinton, second Bush, Shrub as he's known, and then Obama.
Linda on YouTube is saying that you only need one oar in the water of the swamp.
That's right.
Keep rowing along.
Good one, Linda. So we are seeing in this Business Insider here, we're going to talk about a few of the high-level things that just happened. China is in serious trouble. And
you're one of the only people to have said that. I find it very interesting.
Well, John Batchelor and Gordon Chang have been saying. Gordon wrote a book about it, but
most people think China's super strong.
It isn't, and you especially see that when the reason I say that is because I try to focus on the facts, and the facts are that, as we've shown in prior broadcasts, there are 1.3 billion people in China. Most of them are very, very poor. And the internal market in China is very small. Yet they've suckered the world, they've borrowed all kinds of money, and they've invested over $30 trillion in plants and who knows what else. It could be just ghost projects. They got to pay for it. And in order to make that all work, the local population can't buy the products that these plants are pumping out. So they need the US market a lot more than we need the Chinese market. So this game they're playing, they've been selling. Over there in China, they play for keeps. There's like 150 million members of the Communist Party, and a lot of people, the overwhelming majority are not. You get the overwhelming majority of China upset with you, and you may have military, you may have guns, etc., but that's still like 1.15 billion people getting upset. And that's a lot of people. And they don't have the same population bulge that most emerging markets do. They've had the one-child policy for a long time. So there are a lot of older people and people who could, or physically fit, get up and make it very, very difficult, as happened in Romania. You had that Ceausescu was a tyrant in Romania, and it got to a certain point where they just said, look, this is crazy. And then the pitchforks come out, and then you have Iran has not gotten the message. To think, if the Iranians believe, and interestingly, I'll reveal something that just happened today to me. I got an email from some nice person in Iran saying, would I be willing to go on some Iranian show? And I said, yeah, tell me more. But if the Iranian government seriously believes for 1 second that they will last longer than 24 hours if they shut the Straits of Hormuz, they have got another thing coming. Because this president will never let the Straits of Hormuz stay shut. Maybe it takes more than a day to mount the opposite. But this is a...
What's the strategic significance? Trade or military?
That's where a lot of oil comes out of. That's that narrow strait. If it's really between Saudi Arabia and Iran. You've got Kuwait over here, and the narrow strait, I think, is over here, and it's pretty short. So if they were to shut that down, making it impossible for ships to get in and out of key loading stations in there, there's no way we tolerate that.
Saudi Arabia wouldn't be too fond of that either, I would.
Well, they hate they hate each other basically. Yeah. So, but to think that by test firing an anti-ship missile and mouthing off the way they've been mouthing off, these people, in the leadership of the government in Iran is, they are in for one hell of a reckoning here, and it will not simply be a U.S.-backed reckoning. They have managed to, for decades, upset Sunni Arabs across the world, and as well, of course, Israel. They do not have the upper hand when it comes to military might, money, the backing of their populace. They are fighting a losing battle here. And with that regime replaced, if that does happen, by an uprising locally, yes, you could get a more militant regime, you could get a left-leaning regime. Hopefully you get a secular state in Iran. That is what would be fantastic if a secular state could evidence itself that was, let's say, more tolerant than the Shah, which would not be difficult. Then there might be real hope for the people. But for so long as this corrupt malacracy in Iran continues to stand on the throats of the population and steal money, as it is doing, from off the oil trade and other ways, and then promote terrorist activities and military venturism around the world. So long as that happens, it's a vexing problem. Technology makes weapons smaller and smaller and more powerful and more powerful. This is not something we can leave to another day. We need to deal with it.
Charles, one of the reasons why I keep sort of pressing Larry Klayman to make friends with Judicial Watch is that I think that they're both bringing out important information. Larry Klayman, of course, is prosecuting this wrongful death suit for some of the family members of the SEAL support staff that was killed on Extortion 17. And Charlie Strange told me that during court testimony from some military guy, he didn't tell me the name, but it came out that Iran is manufacturing the detonators for IEDs in Iraq and Afghanistan. So they are, sort of waging war against the United States. They support terrorism through Hamas, Hezbollah. Iran has been up to a lot of bad stuff for a long time, and there are some YouTubers who, I'm not going to mention, Jake Morphonios, who support Iran and try to make everybody think that Iran is all right. I don't know if I agree with that.
And since you won't bring that up, I'm not going to mention that the Clinton Foundation appears to have been used as a cover to get either money or weapons or whatever to Hezbollah. I mean, it's just, it's diabolical. So one thing here, this is the Rolling Stone piece. I had the privilege of speaking to Matt Taibbi, a while back, and if that's how you pronounce it. He's a very good writer. And on this one, he does bring up a point that might irk our Saudi friends, but I'm prepared to listen about, why the United States should devote resources to what appears to be a civil war in Yemen, where one side is backed by Iran. I'm prepared to listen to that, okay? But I think the American public deserves to discuss it before we commit ourselves to yet another Middle Eastern place where it's unclear what the strategic benefit is, what America's clear national interest is in Yemen. And it's certainly clear that the foreign policy elites in both parties going back decades have not earned the right to have a complete pass from the constitutional requirement to, get a war declared, if that's what this is going to be. Because, after Libya, after Syria, after Iraq, after Afghanistan, after these recent blood-sucking, literally blood-sucking, and it's not simply the deaths, it's the wounds, it's the trauma, it's the uncertainty, and it's not only in America, but locally in these countries. Before we continue down this pattern of engaging ourselves in yet another conflict, we really should take a step back here and say, why are we doing all this stuff? Why are we, a country of 325 million people, deciding that this sort of stuff should go on and on and on? And why is it the mainstream press, which generally likes to go after the Trump administration for everything, why are they not looking into this? Why aren't you seeing more stories about what's going on in Yemen? When I'm over at RT, and there's some great people actually at RT and other Russian and foreign channels, they're regularly, I'm waiting in the green room and there's stories about Yemen and disasters and here and there. Why isn't the New York Times reporting about this, or the Wall Street Journal?
Too busy reprinting stuff from BuzzFeed, I think.
Yeah, I guess. And then this guy Erdogan. I mean, we go back to this next one down here. This is a report from France 24, a French, I think, television group. Mm-hmm. I think this is, I believe, part of I-24, which is something I've been on in an Israeli-owned group. But the situation in Turkey, this idiot Erdogan, who he and his son got very much involved in dirty dealings during the Obama era, transiting material and other things through Benghazi. He was in the Obama era, Obama singled Erdogan out as somebody that we ought to embrace as a partner for peace around the world, and pick the Turkish economy as being a great bright spot where, you know, it's going to be fantastic. It's going to increasingly ally itself with Europe, and it's going to help the European Union, and it's going to help NATO and all this stuff. How wrong were they? And how stupid is this man for thinking that he can really... Turkey is is a small economy, and it's a small number of people. And yes, the modern nation of Turkey is situated in a crossroads between Europe and Asia. Yes, there are all these high-level arguments, but equally yes, the lira is really collapsing here. Now, the significance of this for people who are not familiar with economics, because of, under the Obama era and before, because European banks needed to find places to lend money, and because there was this big, you know, puff piece tale about how Turkey's a great place, European banks are on the hook. They've lent a tremendous amount of money into Turkey, denominated chiefly in euros. So as the value of the lira crashes, that means the value of the collateral against these loans crashes. That means that many of these European banks are, you know, this isn't like taking down a smaller economy. You take Turkey down, the ripple impact into primarily Europe is going to be very, very serious, which is why you're going to see concern on the financial markets this week of just this thing.
Why is it called the lira, Charles? Isn't that what the Italian money used to be?
Each country can, you know...
It's not linked to Italy?
Oh, no. It's just a separate currency. So with all this going on, you know, we like each week to talk about the high points. When in the heck are the government authorities going to do something about the Clinton charity frauds? And here's this story I was referring to when you asked the question. This, I think, there is a Department of Justice press release. I don't know if it's linked in here or not, but they try to argue that no, the plane, it had everything to do with a drug bust and nothing with the Clinton Foundation.
Robin tweeted about it, and she said that she didn't even realize that they had a 757, that it must have been added after her tenure there, and it seemed like a really significant asset to put in place there.
Well, my understanding, years and years ago, when it was a lot smaller company, in 1987, after the Tax Act of 1986, decimated real estate people and a whole bunch of leveraged people, the corporate jet market cratered. And there was an opportunity to buy Learjet, the company. And we worked in a portion of a firm that had an investment fund. I went down to Tucson.
Bought it?
No, we looked at it. We got the presentation. They were only churning out from memory like less than 50 Learjets a year, down from a very high number because of the Tax Act change and whatever. People who bought the Learjets were these real estate developers and whatever. And so I was very surprised in the presentation that we received, and I remember it even now, that their argument for why we should really be optimistic is that the government likes to, you know, get these Learjets and they get them turned over. What'll happen is there'll be a drug bust, and they get, you know,
seize it
and they keep it, you know.
It's good business to be in.
So when we talk here about the Clinton Foundation, I think it's important for people to understand that it's a hydra. You know, I hadn't put
multi-headed beast.
Exactly. Yeah, and I'm not talking about Debbie Wasserman Schultz.
That's Medusa.
Right.
That's a different mythical creature.
But what I've done here is I've tried to put up what I believe are the proper legal names, exact legal names of some of the entities. These are the primary entities inside the U.S. This excludes a large number of international ones and even some small U.S. ones. I believe the correct legal name of what they're calling the Bill, Hillary, and Chelsea Clinton Foundation is actually still the William J. Clinton Foundation. And I am certain, as I will explain to you, that it's only supposed to be a domestic, even a Little Rock-based library and research facility. That's it.
Yeah.
Nothing else. But here's some of the other things that they're doing. This Clinton Legal Expense Trust, the documents I've seen so far suggest that it was formed for some reason, and I like Oklahoma, but I don't for the life of me understand why they would set it up in Oklahoma. They got a tax ID number. In Maryland, we have proof, FBI listening, in Maryland we have proof that they registered to to solicit in Maryland claiming that this Clinton Legal Expense Trust was a charity. Now, you cannot set up a charity to pay off your personal legal bills.
Yeah,
That's
the
preposterous.
name of it just gives it away. Charles, some lawyer out in the audience is going to know why they chose Oklahoma. There's got to be something specific about state law that causes them to choose that.
Well, if so, let's hear. Perhaps it was that at the time they had, comfort that if people started asking questions in Oklahoma, that the apparatus in Oklahoma would say, we don't answer questions until Bill Clinton is gone. And then we don't have to worry about it. Yeah. It could be something like that. But that thing in theory was liquidated. This, what we call old chai, this thing in theory was liquidated, and I put a question mark over there because there's evidence of companies called Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS Initiative, Inc. still operating with that name in multiple foreign countries.
So when you say liquidated, Clinton Legal Expense Distrust liquidated, what does that mean?
So when you form a company and you get to the end of its days and you say, look, I don't want that company anymore, you go through a process, and if it's a charity,
just selling the chairs and stuff like that?
You're down to that, but if it's a charity, see, the standard trick that the FBI warns about, other governments warn about, is you create a charity, right? And then you say you liquidated it, but you don't. You keep it out there and you still are soliciting, and you don't file reports. You tell the IRS you liquidated it, but you're still soliciting and you keep the money. That's one trick. Another trick is you raise a whole bunch of money and you say, I'm going to do it to pay off these legal bills, or to do it a valid purpose, to build a library. And then you don't build the library, but you have the money, and then you just go out of business and you don't tell anybody what you did with the money, which is why there is a specific set of forms, and they're very detailed, that you have to fill out when you liquidate a charity. And state laws apply, and the Arkansas laws did apply back then. They have never, to my knowledge, filled out the form on liquidating many charities, but particularly the Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS Initiative. Then you have the Clinton Health Access Initiative. Now, in each case, you look at, in green is the purpose, domestic library research. But every single purpose that they have articulated for all these other charities is something they're not authorized to control. In many cases, the William J. Clinton Foundation controls or has an influence over all these charities. You're not allowed to say, what I'm going to do is create a charity in Little Rock to house a library and research center, and then when I tire of that, what I'm going to do is I'll create a subsidiary to go,
fight AIDS.
To fight aliens on Mars. I mean, you can't.
Space Force, Charles.
Yeah, Space Force. You can't do that. You have to. The parent foundation has to make sure that all of the money that they solicit is solicited, telling the donors it's going for the actual purpose, and then they have to go a step further and use the money for the authorized purposes. And if they don't do that, it's a crime called diversion. You can't go out and say, I'm raising money for a library, and then you say, well, that's not sexy. Why don't I fight HIV/AIDS? I'll get a lot more money. You can't do that. But of course they did do that. And you can't do, between March 24th, 2004 and December 31st, 2005, they said they were fighting global HIV and AIDS. And then they expanded. AIDS wasn't good enough. We'll do tuberculosis, we'll do malaria, we'll do but they never got approval. They never got, knowingly told the IRS, look, we said we were going to fight HIV and AIDS. We never had authority to do that. But now the story's changed. We're going to fight other things. They never explained any of that.
They're going to fight Donald Trump.
They're going to fight Donald Trump. They're going to fight, Juanita Broderick's lawyers. They're going to do all that kind of stuff. You can't do that. Then in 2005, they say, you know what? Bill just had a heart attack. When you have a heart attack, often that's because you're fat. Why don't we fight obesity? So we'll do that. And this Alliance for a Healthier Generation, the legal entity wasn't created until 2010. But they said, you know what? We'll just start fighting obesity anyway in 2005 with no authority.
This is where Chris Gowan came in with the Diet Coke.
Probably. And then by late in 2010, but they create this thing with Mike Bloomberg. I think they hoodwinked Mike Bloomberg, as smart as he is. And they got him involved in a horrible mess, the C40 Cities Climate Leadership Group. We have the documents for it, FBI, if you need them. You can get them yourself. But the Clinton Foundation began to quote, fight climate change in 2006. Now, that's interesting, and maybe it's an issue, a real issue, but fighting climate change for purely a charitable purpose is a lot different than going around the world and creating all these projects that Ira Magaziner and his various advisors and friends can rape and pillage with fees and consulting arrangements and profits, interests, and all this kind of stuff. And you have to go, when you do this kind of stuff, you have to say, look, here's how we're fighting climate change, here's the authority we have for it, here's why it's charitable, here's why the parent Clinton Foundation should be doing this and controlling it, and by the way, here's all the profit, if any, that people around the charity are deriving off of the efforts to fight climate change. And of course, they did none of that.
Well, they're busy fighting hunger in the restaurant inside the presidential library.
Exactly. And so we've had a show about the America-India Foundation. It's time to revisit that, and we will be doing that. But that's something that was created in 2001, saying that Bill was the honorary chairman of it. And in Clinton Foundation reports, they talk about the work that Bill does in the guise of being involved with the Clinton Foundation. In 2001, Bill had no formal role with the Clinton Foundation. He, in his book, says he created my foundation in January 2001, but in the 990s, the reports to the IRS and state, Bill Clinton's name does not appear. So he gets involved in what I think is the biggest charity involved in fraud in India with an American-based, the American India Foundation. For a good measure, on December, I think 4th or 5th, 2001, they decide to be charitable. They're still, bankrupt, but they decide they're rich enough that they can set up a foundation. So they do that in New York State. And I bring this up, FBI and attorneys general, this, sure looks to me as if there were two operations. There was one in Little Rock that didn't do anything at all, really. And there was then the second Bill became ex-president, and Hillary was a sitting senator of the United States. They created this nexus in New York, in Harlem and in Chappaqua, and they began to operate as a charity, supposed charity, from a base in New York without registering, without filing reports that are truthfully required to be filed, and in this case, without disclosing the relationships between this Clinton Family Foundation, which was supposed to be just a grant-making organization, that is a private foundation. It sure looks to me as if they were pretending that it might have been a public charity where they were entitled to get a higher tax deduction than they should have gotten. But this is something we don't see people digging in. This is much bigger than the Trump Foundation. This has happened, Donald Trump Foundation that's in the news. This has been a bad operation since December 4th, 2001. And as we mentioned before, even though they only operated for a short period of time in 2001, they nonetheless filed the tax form that is required, the informational return that's required for 2001 for that short period, December 4th to December 31st, 2001. Yet, for the Clinton Foundation, the main thing...
You're talking about the Trump Foundation?
No, I'm talking about the Clinton Family Foundation. They did the filing, in theory, they filed the date range, the form for this short, less than a month in December. They did file that form, but for the parent foundation, they didn't do it. And the thing that I just noticed this morning putting this together is, who was the lawyer involved, whose name is listed as the lawyer involved with this Clinton Family Foundation in the filings in New York State?
Kinnicky Gibson?
David Kendall. The same guy who was a senior partner, who was like the attack dog for the Clintons, who was centrally involved as one of the named incorporators of the Clinton Foundation. So if he knows in 2001 that you're supposed to file a short form on the foundation for a tiny thing, why didn't they file the short form in 1997? And I think the reason is obvious, because filing it, you expose that this whole thing has been a fraud since the beginning. Nothing more than a way to to raise money, to shuffle it off to lawyers and others, to fight off impeachment, to fight off their personal problems. Then we get to the Clinton Global Initiative. Now that to me is, if you remember the great game show, Monty Hall, Let's Make a Deal, that's all this is. This is an absurd proposition, the Clinton Global Initiative. They organized the legal entity September 4th, 2009, but that's, legal entity? We don't need to do that. We'll start this thing in September 2005. And the forms for the Clinton Global Initiative are completely wrong. The disclosure forms where they get their tax exemption. Same thing with the Clinton Bush Haiti Fund. The thing happens, they're out raising money for the Clinton Bush Haiti Fund, and They are collecting money for Haiti in multiple different pockets without authority. There's definitely a relationship between the Clinton Bush Haiti Fund and the parent, the William J. Clinton Foundation. The main one we all know about. This main one is not allowed to raise money for one purpose and then send it to other places that have overhead and whatever, and use it for something completely different. By state law, you're not allowed to do that, and by the correct operation of their articles of incorporation and bylaws, you're not allowed to do what they actually have been doing serially. Then you get to this Bush-Clinton-Katrina fund. That's even worse. There, the disaster happens sometime around August 27th, 2005. They raise a lot of money, tremendous amount of money, with no organization at all. And it's Bill Clinton on a phone taking cash at the state fair. He writes about it in his book.
What?
In his book Giving, he talks about how he's walking down the street or the fairgrounds at some New York State fair, unclear which one, because different county fairs. But he's doing this right well before there is.
People are handing him cash.
And a woman comes up and says, "Mr. President, I would have sent you a check, but I'm busy. Can you make sure that..."
Steal my money in person.
Yeah, and whatever.
I'm sure he reported that cash.
Oh yeah, he wouldn't have spent that. And he was so scrupulous to a fault.
Right to the script club.
Yeah, exactly. Then you have the International AIDS Trust, which is something that started in January, I think January 26th or 29th, 2001, in Georgia. And the only record I see of it, it was immediately dissolved in Georgia, but then it somehow migrated to Washington, D.C., and we don't really know whatever happened to this International AIDS Trust. We do know that the brilliant Bill and Melinda Gates gave the International AIDS Trust more than 90% of their initial contributions in 2001 before it was tax exempt. I don't think it ever became tax exempt. So this is a family of problems. Today, we don't have time to talk about all these other problems. We're just going to talk about the big-ass William J. Clinton Foundation, the main one. And as we go through this, I want you to resist the temptation to think about, let's stay on this page one more second, to resist the temptation to think about all of the people who knew about this fraud, all of the trustees of all these organizations, all the executives, all the people who looked at this mess and said, it's a mess, but we've got a sitting senator, we got a former president, Hillary might want to be president one day, they're clearly up to no good. If we give them a small amount of money, we're buying protection, if we're Bill Gates. We give you $150 million, maybe you won't notice the Microsoft monopoly. Maybe you'll help us stave off the European monopoly commissions as they make an issue of that.
Why resist the temptation? You're being facetious.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So you got the Gates people, you got the Rockefellers, you got the Children's Investment Fund Foundation, many others. You got a lot of accounting firms, BKD, Price Waterhouse, Cohn Resnick, Mitchell & Titus, KPMG, a whole bunch of others. Many law firms, the Kendall's firm, Williams & Connolly, Simpson Thatcher. You got Laureate, the joint venture partners, Ira Magaziner is a consulting firm, Frank Giustra, Tom Hunter, or whatever his first name is, and then all the government officials around the world. Don't think about how many people must have known about this and must have said, what? It's actually a pretty good deal to have dirt on a family that has shown itself so well, both as governor and in the first presidency, hopefully the only presidency, to reward people who move this stuff along and to punish people
get in the way.
who get in the way. So don't think about any of that as we now go and show you hard facts. Now, this, if we could make it a bit smaller, that's great. So what I've done here is we're just going to consider the period 1997, it says 98 there, but 1997 to 2009. And why are we going to do that? We said before that when you take a financial statement for a company, and the challenge for whatever accounting firm is going to try to take this mess on and do something by November 15th, 2018, the challenge is you cannot knowingly rely on flawed work and say, I'm an accounting firm, and despite the 95 two-hour videos on this subject that show tremendous amounts of fraud, we're just going to take the previous firm's books from last year, and we'll just assume those are right and move on. That's gross negligence. You cannot do that. And in this case, what I've done is I've divided this into various periods. The first period is when Bill Clinton was president, when he was impeached but not convicted, 1998 through 2000. There we see they only raised $14.7 million that they declared, which is 2% of the total. Wow. And out of that $14 million, Jason, how much did they spend on programs in 3 years?
110,000?
That's what we call paltry.
What'd they do with the rest of the money?
They kept it in, they paid overheads, but on programs, actual programs, because they had no complex. They hadn't even started building the complex. So how can why did they raise 14.7 million, and did they only raise 14.7 million? And are we sure that the money that was raised, even the 110,000, was actually spent on programs? We're going to show the audience that there's a very significant difference between a program expenditure and what is called management and general expense and fundraising expenses. Accountants love to define things like that, and thank God they do. Program expenses are expenses that have to be spent on the authorized purposes of the foundation. So you can't sit there as nitwit BKD with Benjamin Nitwittis as your lawyer, I'm just making that up, and say, yeah, all right, how much do we spend on programs, Jason? 110 sounds good. 110. Let's put 110. You can't do that. You have to ask yourself, okay, what was the purpose of this client? And then, it sort of helps to ask questions like this. How many employees did they have? None or one. Did they do any of the state tax forms? Probably, not so much. Did they have 3 directors in every year? No. In '99, they claimed they had 2. You can't do that in Arkansas. You have to have at all times 3. So the real question is, while Bill Clinton was president, impeached but not convicted, and this thing was around there, was there even an organization at all, an uppercase organization? And I submit, and will be submitting in writing, there never was an actual formal organization, the Clinton Foundation. So the notion, the argument that the Clinton Foundation is a charity function today falls apart in this initial period. Now, the arguments are not helped in the next period, from 2001 to 2004, when they ostensibly build this center in Little Rock. They claim that they got 137 million. They claim that they spent 56.2 million. So in this period and there's rounding, which is why 2 plus 15 equals 17 in the way we're doing this, for this long period from 98 to 2004, is only 17% of the money that they've raised through 2009 goes to building this thing in Little Rock and for whatever else they were doing. And only 56 million is deemed to be a program expense. We're going to show you that the 56 million number is wrong.
But isn't it just like a red flag to see someone collecting 14 million and just spending 110
and then
137 and 50? It's like, these are huge numbers.
And then the thing is, people show you, when I put these numbers up on the board, where do I get these numbers from? If
Periscope wants to know how much Hillary spent on booze.
I don't know. It's outside the ambit. Yeah, it's outside the ambit. But there's no audit. Okay, now an audit is not, I should go back over this, an audit for a charity of this size, you see the minimum declared revenues is 3 million. That's far above the level, even going back in '98. What they needed to, when you take in more than small money, really hundreds of thousands in certain states, in certain cases, you need to have a real audit. Okay, and an audit is not where the IRS comes to you and says, we have this problem with your tax return. An audit is where you go and you get a real accounting firm, not a BKD, a fake accounting firm, right, and not some employee of BKD who says, oh yeah, you want an audit? I got some extra stationery, I'll put it together for you. Just pay me over here. Don't pay BKD. I mean, they didn't get there. We found no evidence of any kind that they got an audit, but there's ample evidence that they raised money and solicited in many states. And so this right here is a disqualification. I mean, this is a fatal disqualification right here. There's no check of these years, no independent check. And then the ones that were prepared for 2001, 2, 3, and 4, the Clinton Foundation has kept off their website, but we found them in Massachusetts, we found them in California, we found them in other states, and they're all wrong. I mean, they're not audits, they're not compliant audits. And so for the entire period where they accomplished the first step of building the Little Rock Presidential Center, there was never an independent check of the numbers, And that's why I could tell you, at minimum, 64 million was stolen out of the books of the Clinton Foundation. Now, 64 million is, it's almost high 40% of all the money declared.
Wow.
Went missing. And you can see that when you just do simple analysis of the financial statements. Nobody's going to be able to rebut this presumption. 64 million was stolen out of the declared donations of the Clinton Foundation in this time frame. And they purposefully, in this 4-year period, didn't do a cash flow statement. A cash flow statement, for people who don't understand it, is a separate analysis, a rigorous analysis that says, how much cash did I have?
Flowed right into their pocket.
And what happened to it? What happened to my cash?
Yeah, they don't want to tell you.
And now, there's nothing suspicious about $64 million disappearing in 2004 when Terry McAuliffe, one of the outside directors with the most business sense, is the chairman of the Democratic National Committee trying to raise money for dunderhead lurch John Kerry, whose campaign falters. There's nothing suspicious about 64 million going missing in that year when the Democratic Party and John Kerry's campaign needs 64 million, more than 64 million. Nothing suspicious at all.
Charles, what year did Jill McCabe run for state senate in Virginia? That was also financed by Terry McAuliffe.
Right. He knows how to do this. This is how the guy rolls. And that's why there were rumors that he was under FBI investigation, hopefully not by Andrew McCabe. So in this early period, where they're supposedly accomplishing the only authorized purpose that they're approved for, it's only 17% of all the money raised. Then we look in 2005 to 2009. This is when they go hog wild. They raised $767 million in disclosed contributions in this time frame, and nobody thought to ask, why am I giving this thing money? Because they haven't changed their authorized purposes. And I see, and I don't know if we could go on Google, whatever, and I see the trailer, over next to the river there with the floating hanging gardens of Babylon. I see all that kind of stuff, and I've got the banquet hall, the massage parlor, and the swimming pool, and all that.
Mini golf.
Why did so many people, including Bill and Melinda Gates, who are so smart, and others, as a group, governments, send this thing another 767 million, and nobody asks the question, can they do these things they say they're doing? Show me the evidence that they can do any of this. Nobody asks that question. And nobody, BKD along the way here, nobody checked to see that these numbers where they say, it's not just the revenues, it's the money we spent on programs. We spent $661 million on programs, but nobody checked to see if the programs are programs that are legally authorized by the IRS as validly under the control of the Clinton. Nobody checked that?
The Bill Clinton home for wayward prostitutes.
Exactly. So you look at this, we're talking about, just in this early period, in terms of declared monies, $918 million.
Kevin says Jill McCabe ran in 205. I don't know if he means 2005 or 2015. Must be 15.
15, yeah. Thanks, Kevin. So, surface level, this is what they declared. Now I'm going to show you what I believe is the case. We go to the next slide. All right. This is perhaps the first time the audience is going to hear this word, material diversion. Okay? Material diversion is a formal legal term which you're asked about on the IRS forms. And you have to say, it's when you take the assets that are supposed to be used for one purpose and you use it for another purpose. That's a material diversion. That you cannot do that. And let's just see. And it does not simply mean embezzlement or theft. They do that too in 64. In 2004 and afterwards, I believe multiple people embezzled or stole, depending on what the legal term is.
What's the difference between embezzlement?
I'm not really sure. There is a legal. I'm not a lawyer, but it doesn't matter. They did both. Right. So in addition to doing that, the money goes into the thing. The money goes into this fraud, and it goes into the Roach Motel. And unlike Roach Motels, it leaves. There's a back door to the Clinton Foundation. It leaves. There's that. Then in addition, you have the problem if you have loose controls, no independent directors, whatever. We don't really even know if 918 million is the real money that went towards the Clinton Foundation. We just don't know, because we've never had a real audit, no checks, no independent checks. So the key thing is you have to report a lot about these diversions. You have to check and see, how did this happen? what officers, directors, trustees, employees, who's responsible for this diversion?
Wait, so do you mean that there is a legal process for doing it and they didn't do it? Or?
Yes, and what's really fantastic here is, we're going to get to it in a second, a material diversion is defined as being $250,000 or more. Okay, I told you 64 million was stolen out of the 2004 books.
It falls into the or more.
Yeah, exactly. Now, the question is, are people aware of this? Now,
They are now?
They are now, and they're going to be even more aware of it as we go down this track. People are going to say, well, Charles, that happened in 2004. That's, we're in 2018. Get real. No, the way this works is you have to answer yes if the organization became aware during the organization's tax year, 2017 or 18, of a material diversion of assets, whether or not the diversion occurred during the year. This is in the tax form. So you find out there have been material diversions in prior years, and this should be renamed the Material Diversion Foundation. I mean, that's just what they do. They take, liabilities of the Clintons and they turn them to assets of the Clintons, letting the Clintons fly around in private planes and say they're doing all this for the people. So you've got a serious material diversion problem in my mind, going all the way back, really, I think, to 97. And, so what accounting firm in the world is going to take this assignment? It's probably Ben Nitwit's brother or sister has an accounting firm they can use for this. If we go to the next. Okay, now you've seen this before, that this is the actual language from Article 3 of the Articles of Incorporation of the Clinton Foundation. This language has never formally, to my knowledge at all, been amended, okay? And the purposes are clear. It doesn't say first the purposes are to do whatever Bill Clinton and Hillary and Chelsea want to do. It says to establish and support a presidential archival depository as defined by Title 44, Section 2101-1. And that's a long statute, but it's very clear. The first thing they talk about is presidential library, and the second thing they talk about is to undertake and support research and educational activities on policy and historical issues. Okay, that's it. Okay, and the rights to solicit money are defined for those purposes. But more important, if you go up the page here, they set this up in the Articles of Incorporation, which were drafted October 23rd, 1997. They applied for federal tax exemption, filling out Form 1023, and elaborating on this and saying that they're going to do all this work.
Sorry.
It's okay. Make it. What are you doing to me?
I don't know.
Killing
It's
me.
going crazy here now.
This next page. Yeah. Stop, please. They're going to do all this work in Little Rock. The Presidential Library and related facilities will be constructed in a city park to be established for the purpose in Little Rock, Arkansas. It doesn't say that we're going to take offices out in Boston to fight HIV/AIDS, and an office in Chicago for our legal counsel, and offices in Portland, Oregon to fight obesity, and offices in New York to do who knows what. It doesn't say any of that. It says we're going to build a large complex. We have spare office space in a city that's not expensive. We're supposed to be doing work in Little Rock. That's what this thing was supposed to do. It also says, this is a nit, but it also says that they're going to raise money through personal contacts and meetings, not through direct mailing. And when they received on January 29th, 1998, the authorization for the IRS, it said, if you change your sources of support, your purposes, character, or method of operation, please let us know. This is a letter. They're just being nice in the letter. The statute says you better damn well not change your purposes without talking to us in advance.
Yeah.
So they trot this thing out.
Conceivably getting approved.
Yeah, you should do that. So if we go to the next page. All right, here we have some fun. Now I have actually, for the people who want to look at how I did this, what I've done is I've taken the declared purposes. We add in here the program services spending. We add in 2004, so it's a slightly different number than you saw back then. This is what they say were their program service expenses. This is Charles Ortel's estimate of what the amount that was spent on authorized purposes, 70 million out of 728 million.
How do you arrive at that estimate?
I will show you. Some thought went into it. And then you'll see the unauthorized purposes spending $658 million. 90% of the money that they claim as program service expenses, I think, was unauthorized. And I will show you how I did it. So here we have just quick points to keep in mind as I show you this stuff. Here's a Politico article that's really LOL funny, laugh out loud funny. Presidential libraries are a scam. Could Obama change that? No.
Well, he could be MVP of that.
Right. So I don't know if we can pull it up.
Yeah.
So this is actually, in hindsight, a funny thing to look at. Now, this came out. What's the date?
Talking about the former president or the article?
Well, look at the date. May 7th, 2017 is just around the time that James Comey was fired. Right?
Yeah.
And here's this
I think it
political.
was the 9th or the 10th?
9th, I think, yeah. So here's this article. This is a long time in the making. Articles like this don't come. And here it's saying, presidential libraries are a scam. I wonder what libraries they were thinking about on May 7th, 2017. Could that be the Clinton Foundation? I wonder. But presidential libraries are a scam. Could Obama change that? And the answer to that question is not so much.
Something else just came out about this Obama library. They promised not to cut trees in the park, and now they're cutting.
Yeah. So if we go to the next, we're going to go quickly here. Let's not pull this link up. You've seen it before, that if you hit that link and you're interested, detailed memo on the fact that these smart lawyers, or maybe in Arkansas it's pronounced liars, Hillary and Bill, and the others around them, they never amended the key document, Articles of Incorporation, Section 3. They never amended that to attempt to give the Clinton Foundation expanded authority to do all these things that they nevertheless went and did. And then this is really, we've talked to you in the past about this, but the volume of false and materially misleading statements, hypothetically speaking, might have been put together in a set of exhibits for certain countries that runs to close to 2,000 pages, and for many American audiences, it's more like 4,000 pages or more. I mean, it might be that big, and that's a summary.
That's the Cliff Notes.
That's the Cliff Notes. And so here you go, if you hit that link, please. All right, this gives you an idea. This is a summary of, and there's additional information. This is just, I think, a federal summary, but it makes you, eventually when you read through it, I know what you did there. It tells you, it tells you what forms you need to file, federal forms, and then it also later will point you to, these are the state forms and foreign forms. A lot of forms need to be filed. Unfortunately for the Clinton Foundation, they did file many forms, hid them, and they're mostly all wrong.
Yeah.
So if we go to the next, no need to pull this one up here, but we've had, this is this 33-year-old article that explains, 33-year-old article, oh yeah, number, that explains why tax-exempt organizations can't engage in illegal activities, as if you really need to write a memo about that, but I think the memo is...
Even non-tax exempt organizations can't engage in illegal activities because they're illegal. So it's a short memo.
Here, it was a 13-page memo.
So 33 years old and 13 pages. Yeah. We got to look at that.
Yeah. So it takes you through. There's a lot of verbiage here, but people who are question, why we're bringing this up, read the memo and get back to me. So then if we go at the bottom of this page, there's this hard deadline. We mentioned it earlier in the broadcast, November 15th, 2008, midnight. They have to file their tax forms correctly. And this time, I think if it's not already there's a new head of the IRS. There are people asking questions about how come we didn't figure this out a long time ago. There are multiple FBI investigations and IRS investigations, foreign investigations. This hard deadline is a serious, serious deadline. Now, they could distract, manufacture a crisis or whatever, but it's a hard deadline and it's coming hard on them. So if we go to the next page. Okay, this, if we could make it a little smaller. Okay, what I did here is I took these are actual numbers from the information returns, what are called 990s, and I give you the lines of what they say they spent on personnel costs, right? Now, hypothetically speaking, if you were the Clinton family and you wanted Hillary Clinton to run for president and you didn't want to spend your own money on it, and you wanted people to pay for political hacks on your staff, you could employ those political hacks in your friendly foundation. And you could claim that, this is all great, serving marvelous purposes, and in theory, you could try to do that. But in practice, you're not allowed to do that, unless you're the Clintons and the Obamas. You're not allowed to, say that you're going to have a charity that's supposed to exclusively operate in Little Rock and house archives and research center, and was able to do that with only $1.4 million spent in 2004, the year they finished it, and $2.3 million spent in 2005. You were able to do that in all of 2005, spending $2.3 million. So please explain why, in the year in which Hillary Clinton had to run for re-election, did you suddenly need to spend $9.7 million? Please explain that to me. And then the next year, which she's really running her presidential campaign starting in January, $21 million.
Wow.
And then in the year where she's in the primaries, $30 million. And then in the year after Barack Obama, his first year of presidency, $32 million. It's indefensibly high. I do a scale here where I say, the level, to make it simple for people who are not comfortable with math, 100 means that's the level of spending in 2005. 4 times as high in 2006, 9 times in 2007, 13 times in 2008, 14 times in 2009. So then I say to myself, all right, this is idiot stuff. I mean, it's nothing fancy about it. So let's just say, be generous. Wages didn't go up 15% a year. Cost shouldn't have gone up 15%. Let's take the pool of people that were paid $2.3 million in 2005 and be generous to them and say, we're going to allow the spending on personnel in connection with this thing to rise at 15% per year. What should that spending have been? Well, instead of spending 9.7, they should have spent 2.6. Instead of spending 20, they should have spent 3. 30, 3. 32, 4. Okay? And therefore, the difference is what I call padding, right? They layered $7 million in this exercise, extra expenses, then $17 million, then $27 million, then $28. You're not allowed to do any of this. And that's 55 plus 17 is what? 72 plus 7 is $80 million of personnel costs from 2006 to 2009 put on the backs of this foundation.
How many people were working there?
Probably none. But
but couldn't we find out for real the number of employees?
Well, that's the kind of thing an auditor does.
Right.
But instead you've got notorious BKD in there, and you've got the cover. The books that come out for the Clinton Foundation during 2007 are only put into the IRS after Barack Obama wins the presidency in 2008. So they're able to cover this over because Barack Obama's in there, his team is in there, dirty Eric Holder is in there, dirty Lois Lerner is in there, dirty Bob Mueller, as far as I'm concerned, is in the FBI. They're able to cover all this off. But this is something that if there is a real FBI investigation, a real IRS investigation, they will see this. So the question is this Clinton Foundation a charity, in green, or a dumping ground to pay off your political hacks? I think we know the answer to that question. Will any Clinton Foundation trustee, especially including, Diarrhea Chelsea, stand up and instead of parading around as a paragon of virtue, put on a big girl skirt and look at this guide here to Arkansas law and understand that you have a duty of care, a duty of loyalty, and a duty of obedience to the Clinton Foundation, not to the people, not to your father, not to your mother, but to the Clinton Foundation to make sure this is a charity. Just this one thing here is an example of $80 million of, I would argue, unauthorized expenses, falsely characterized as being in the furtherance of the authorized purposes of this thing. $80 million is it's about 80% of what I believe it cost to actually build the Clinton Foundation in Little Rock.
But I thought you said that was like way over.
Well, they claim 160. I'm saying my estimate, and others, we're having people really sharpen pencils and look at it. I think 100 million or so, roughly, 80 to 100 million was spent on the construction. And here we have 80 million in unauthorized personnel costs for people who shouldn't even be on the payroll.
That's crazy.
Right? And then when will these state, federal, and foreign governments, get off their asses? It's not like we're running around the world, every major government has surpluses. We all have deficits in the US, deficits across Europe, deficits in all these countries. Why are you letting this fraud rob you of tax revenue? Why are you letting the donors who are rich, like the Gates Foundation, the Rockefellers, and others, who I believe are culpable, have vulnerabilities, why are you letting them off the hook? Are you enthralled to them?
Yeah. I
It's-
would say yes.
Yeah, all right.
And then, Kevin was just in the comments saying that the 990 will tell you the number of employees, but who knows if that's accurate. It tends to be materially misleading.
You got that lingo down. People are going to think you're a Hollywood accountant.
Yeah.
So if we go to the next page. All right. The answer to your question, when we're done with this, there's, I think, 6 more pages that take each of those years and show you how I got the numbers. And we'll take one of them or 2 of them. But to just dwell on this, Donald Trump, really slammed Sessions yesterday.
Oh, really?
Slammed him again. He tweeted out, he's scared, don't bring it up. He's scared, stiff, and missing in action. He's taking criticism for that. People in MSNBC are saying, wait a minute, this is obstruction, and Mueller's going to find more evidence of obstruction. So anyway, then again, don't hit this one either, but this is a video that appears to suggest that this person who put the video together believes that Brennan may already either have been indicted or be the subject of indictment, Brennan being the crooked former head of the CIA, in my judgment. And I'll say that because he's out there saying Donald Trump's a traitor on television, being paid by whatever ridiculous organization would pay him. Now, the reason I asked you not to talk about the Barack Obama thing is this story in Breitbart. The first question I have is, where are Barack Obama's, not his birth certificate, where are the presidential records? Where the heck are those records? Okay, and this is the story you were thinking about, I think.
Yep.
This has 14,000 shares, and it's a day old. Okay, that's pretty amazing. So they pledged, the Obama Presidential Center broke a pledge. What's new? That's what they do. I mean, they said they were going to house the presidential records in their articles of incorporation, and now they're saying they're not. That's a material change. I don't think you could do that. I don't think you could get tax exemption for a presidential archive and then say, actually, it's going to be a religious order worshiping Barack Obama. I mean, you can't do that.
Look at the amount of space it occupies.
That's in Chicago, not in Little Rock.
Right.
Why do you need 19 acres for this thing that's not going to house presidential records? I mean, don't we care?
19.3. Why do they make a point of telling us that?
I don't know. Is that a magic number?
93 is.
Okay. Well, there you have, why are they doing this? Cutting trees down is not good. And people who know about sustainability, that's not good. It's on the National Register of Historic Places. Yeah.
Oh. I don't know, Charles. There's, coincidences abound when it comes to this kind of crap.
Yeah. So if we just move along here, that's okay.
That's for the fans of Quinn Michaels and Charles Ortel.
Here's this New York Post thing. This is a great guy, Michael Goodwin, talking about all this chaos. And Michael Goodwin's a gifted writer. I think he's an award-winning writer and long-standing journalist. He's always on television and stuff. But this is a good point. His foreign policy is actually boosting our standing, not weakening it.
Yeah.
People are saying, causing all this chaos. No, he's shaking everything up and saying, enough with this
Don't mess with me.
This globalist swamp. You want a place where you can invest your money, be fairly taxed, be treated, under equal justice, where we welcome foreign capital. We would like nothing more than for people to invest in factories in this country and export from here. We love that. Come do it. And then you start looking at this and you say, why I've got $100 million to invest in something. Why would I put it into Germany? Why would I do that? Why would I put it into Brazil? Why would I put it into China? And I think Goodwin is absolutely right. He gets it. But you're not going to see anybody agree with this on MSNBC or the Crooked News Network. So if we go to the next, So I mentioned Brazil. This is a sad one. One of my grandmothers was Brazilian. I've been down there many times. It's a lovely, used to be a great country. But you read this story here, it's just people, it's worse than Chicago.
Oof.
That's tough to be.
And in what city is that? Rio?
Rio, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's gotten to the point where the police aren't being paid, so when that happens, they get...
63,880 homicides? I mean, that's like a war.
Right, and that's in the whole country, which is smaller. I think it's 200 million people.
Oh, wow, they're shrinking the population. Wow.
And you have a connection to Brazil as well. You've been there.
No longer.
The Acne State, that came in. It's a sad name. You go. The Acne State in the north came in second. I'd rename that state.
Yeah, that's not a good name for it. Well, gee,
So China's situation here, on the one hand, China. Don't click. Well, okay.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay. I'm just trying to move it along.
Yeah.
China claims they're going to take over this Total deal in a big Iran gas deal. That is not a smart move for China. Really not a smart move. Because, China is not, first of all, China will not get along well with Iran in any event. And that is not going to lessen Donald Trump's interest in disciplining both Iran and China.
Right, it's just corralling the enemies into one pool.
You're making this easy for me. Okay? So...
yeah, I mean, Iran is a very religious government, and China is totally secular, right?
Well, they just announced that they've got internment camps for those Uyghurs, or however you pronounce the Muslim, millions of them.
China has that?
China had just announced yesterday that there's
Wow.
internment camps for millions of Muslims in China, and now you're going to get, maybe they're Sunni Muslims, so the Iranians don't care, but...
Interesting. I guess they like that.
Yeah. Now here, this is a story, this is on BBC, right? Now BBC I hate. I mean, I think it is such biased reporting. But here is, even BBC, crazy BBC, is saying South Africa risks Zimbabwe-style land chaos. And here I am going to call out Barack Obama harshly. He was just in South Africa, giving credibility, lending what remains of his credibility to a government that is disgusting. This new government has announced that they're going to seize white land and that they're going to murder, that people who get in the way will be murdered.
Wow.
And these rabble-rousers have gone so far as to say, and at least we're just murdering you. We put on the table, white genocide is an option. We're not there yet, but you should be happy that we're just murdering the white farmers who won't give up their lands. And for Barack Obama to go down as the first American president and agree to appear on stage. I mean, here you get, who had to resign because he went to Strom Thurmond's birthday party, the Trent Lott or whatever. Here's Barack Obama likely being paid to go down and dignify this criminal maniac in a part of the world that is really as dangerous in some respects as the Middle East, because of the ethnic rivalries down there, to give the idea that it's okay for the black majority to murder and steal property of white people because they're white. That is really, you put the shoe on the other foot in the United States of America where the majority is white. Is it okay to go ahead and murder and steal property from black people in the United States? I mean, that's in essence what Barack Obama has dignified by showing up in South Africa at this moment in time, lending his considerable remaining credibility, which may not be so great in a few weeks, to go down there and do this. And we have the barking dogs in the mainstream media just say, oh, Barack Obama went to South Africa. Isn't that nice? It's great.
Harmon Wilfred's butcher is a German guy from South Africa who would not go on camera, unfortunately, because he was a very interesting guy to speak to. He left South Africa because the violence was intense.
Right. And you could argue that this present violence has happened after centuries of violence against
apartheid.
But that doesn't mean that this type of violence is right.
Or
and
that
I'll tell you,
Obama should support it.
Yeah, it's outrageous, absolutely outrageous. The Nobel Peace Prize winner in 2009 is going down there taking blood money.
I don't trust that Nobel Peace Prize, and I think Barack Obama has been up to a lot of screwy crap for a long time.
So this is a very interesting, I've got today disproportionate credit to Zero Hedge. Tyler Durden does a good job here. But this you know, my hackles were up even before I saw this story.
Those are good hackles.
And I think I've revealed to the crowd, I had dinner on September 10th, 2001 with the former president of Jane's Defense Weekly and a colleague. And I asked, you know, got a chance to ask that person, you know, several questions, but one of them was, I asked him that night at dinner at San Pietro's Italian restaurant, which I love, if it's still around, what's the chance of a major terrorist attack happening in Manhattan? I asked him.
The night before you,
Yep.
and what did the Jane's defense guy say?
100%. I didn't say when. I said, what's the time of it chance of it happening? He said, 100%. It's going to happen. It happened before. It happened in '93.
Yeah.
And you know, the same sort of hackles that we in the Paddock thing. You know, whenever there's a shooting incident, a major shooting, or there's, God forbid, a major terrorist attack, it shifts the entire focus of the media away from the narrative that's unfolding here of exposing the deep state. And also, as happened in 2001, what it does is it causes the masses in the population to say, you know what, my goodness, you know, here's an attack, you know, we need to surrender even more of our freedom to the deep state, otherwise this could happen again. And the further thing this would do, if it were to happen, and I obviously hope it doesn't happen, is it would be very dangerous to the Trump narrative that you're safer now under Donald Trump if we have such an attack. And I'm not saying that the deep state would foment such an attack, but I am saying that, you know, when you think about who benefits, right? Trump he got inaugurated. They tried to stop that with the various means. He got inaugurated. They tried to stop his major people from being confirmed. He got that done. They're trying to stop him getting his Supreme Court picks. He's going to get them done. And that's, you know, September 4th timeframe is when they're going to have the confirmation hearings on Kavanaugh. If he gets across the line and it's 5-4, no longer 4-4, 5-4, and if Kavanaugh is a constitutionalist, the type one hopes he is, that's a major problem for, you know, the deep state, for the left. And, you know, here this is all coming together on a timeline. The pressures are mounting on the Clinton Foundation, donors to it, many charities, dirty charities like I believe also the Obama Foundation. We have, you know, this anniversary coming up, September 11th, 17th anniversary of that. And then we have, you know, traditionally the crashes, big market crashes have happened in October. Then we have the election, you know, November 6th. So, I mean, I would encourage members of the crowd, honestly, you see something, you say something, anything suspicious, you know, had more people spoken up prior to September 11th, 2001 and made an issue of concerns they had, maybe, you know, maybe we wouldn't have been struck in the way we were struck September 11th, 2001.
And that's why we need to exercise an abundance of caution when there's suspicion of terrorism.
Right. So if we go back into the slides here. This is a great article, in hindsight, to read this. This is what got Andrew Napolitano in a bit of trouble. This is dated March 14th, 2017. Okay, this is a while ago.
Yeah.
Here's Napolitano bravely, and I think correctly, saying the Obama administration used GCHQ to spy on Trump during the campaign. It could be that it was even before then.
Well, he was way out in front.
Well, he got disciplined. He got taken off the air.
Because it was true.
Yeah.
That's shocking. That's why I think Fox is really it's a different flavor of the same poo-poo.
Well, Fox has some explaining to do, and it creates an opportunity for Crowdsource the Truth and other independent groups to get back into this. But to me, the notion that elements of GCHQ, either working or retired elements of GCHQ and other English spies, were engaged in a project whose benefit for them, the English, would have been that, you know, Hillary Clinton would have reversed Brexit, or would have stopped, you know, would have done level best to
certainly would have slowed the momentum of this international movement of nationalism.
Right, and so the notion that might have happened and there might have been a real deep-seated project seems corroborated to me by just what we know so far in the public domain. And then the fact that so many emails and other messages are missing and they're resisting getting this. The icing on the cake for me would be, and the irony would be, if the man who returned Winston Churchill's bust to the UK, you know, and who claimed that it was, I think his grandfather had been abused by the British.
He said that?
Yeah.
Who's Frank Marshall Davis's father?
No, stop that. No. But the father that he claims, his grandfather, anyway, his Kenyan father, was abused in Kenya by the British, supposedly. That person would end up in a place where he and senior members of his team were collaborating with the British to interfere in an election, to rig an election, and then interfere in its results.
British collusion.
I mean, the real story is not Russian collusion, but British, and it's not with all of Britain, but with elements of the UK who were all in for unregulated globalism, all in for socialism, all in for causes that are not subject to really being regulated, and all into dark money flowing around the world that ends up, oh, by the way, in their pockets. This is a big story here. It's, one thing to go around pounding the table saying it's Russia, it's Russia, it's Russia. If the United Kingdom actually was engaged in dirty tricks against this country, there should be severe repercussions.
Hell to pay, Charles.
We'll send them, for starters, the bill for redoing the White House in 1812 with interest.
I would love it if Trump did. That is Trumpian right there.
All right. So here we have this. This is that piece that Thomas Paine is mentioned in it, and we really don't yet know what was actually going on, in my view.
With that jet.
And I want a clear and convincing explanation, but more to the point, I want to see the FBI release as much as possible of the real files on the investigation that happened between 2001 and 2005. I want to know what was going on starting in January of 2016 with the Clinton Foundation. Why wasn't there investigation before that? I think the public deserves to know the real truth about how these presidential libraries, and I fear it's not just the Clinton Foundation, it may well be the H.W. Bush Foundation. It was a place where instead of having those incriminating records when he was vice president go into that library, maybe a deal was cut with the archives and the Clintons and everyone else saying, these Iran-Contra issues and MENA and all that, we don't want anybody asking tough questions about those records.
Right.
So when you see the same archivist, receiving the H.W. Bush Library on November 4th, 5th, 1997, in the first portion of the year where Bill Clinton is president, and you see 2 days later on the 7th, Hillary and Bill announced that they've selected the location for their foundation, even though they're not trustees of anything. How do they have power to select anything to do with the Clinton Foundation if they're not going to be a trustee or an executive? And they weren't. So when you see all that, you'd like to see a lot more evidence of hard work translating into indictments so we can finally, and I'm joking here about a serious topic, so we can get down to the serious task of playing indictment bingo, which is, what do the indictments say and how long does it take to bingo the defendant and put that defendant in the hoosegow and get back the money, the restitution that American taxpayers are owed for these decades of criminal charity frauds.
I don't think we can say enough about the connection between H.W. Bush and Bubba Clinton with regard to what went on with Iran-Contra and Mena Airport. It is amazing to me, Charles, how effective the deep state has been in essentially scrubbing Iran-Contra from the collective consciousness of the entire world. So few people, even educated people, at my age, remember what it is. And I remember watching Oliver North, testifying on the television. I was maybe like 10 or something, but I was like, what's up with this guy? And then he was on CNN. That's absurd.
Yeah.
I mean, how do people not see right through this? It's
and it's bipartisan corruption, right? There's still, ridiculous. I think, a few more things. Yeah. And then we've already covered this thing about Obama, but this is in South Africa. Oh, I don't know what this is. We have this rally that supposedly white nationalists are rallying in Washington, D.C. I believe there's already been, I think an NBC crew was attacked by Antifa yesterday.
That's ironic.
Yeah, of course they won't cover that. But, to be a white nationalist today is to be truly silly. And, we've come so far as a nation. Of course, Donald Trump correctly condemned all types of racism. All lives matter. And in this day and age, in 2018, with all the benefits that even somebody who doesn't have a formal advanced education has access to all these videos and lots more to get behind and understand the truth, it makes no sense from any perspective to start going down the path of being a black nationalist, a white Hispanic nationalist. It's just ridiculous in America. We have a constitution. That's what governs this country. There's no place for this kind of stuff. But you see, we're strong enough as a country to allow these idiots to go and rally so that they can be ridiculed by people like you and me who say, who are these idiots? And who would, in today's day and age, try to rally for this absurd cause. So
the guy looks crazy, doesn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. So if we go back for a second, Jason, I promised that I would take you through a year or two and we've got all these years on the slides. Everybody can look at it. If you look at the next page, here's how you do what I did. This is just arithmetic, okay? You take the total programming service expenses that they declared, and I show you where to find it. And then this cash grant, this non-cash grant to the National Archives shouldn't be included. Take that off, 36 million. It's incorrectly calculated and it shouldn't have been listed as a cash expense, which it was. There's no authority for them to throw parties.
Wait a minute, so 36 million is just a number they made up?
It completely invented.
So turn it upside down, okay.
Just get rid of it.
Yeah.
And then take out the events. There's no authority to hold a party for your political supporters.
Strip clubs.
Exactly. And then they made a grant. They claimed they made a grant in 2004 to an entity that didn't exist and was not authorized to do what it said it was going to do. Take that off.
Good old chai.
You don't need to spend $1.5 million to travel expenses to operate a research center and a library in Little Rock. Take the travel off.
This is important, though, because they are historically, that's a scheme, is stealing money from travel scams.
Right. Yeah, they know how to do that. And who cleared them on Travelgate?
Rosenstein?
Rat Rosenstein.
Yeah.
I mean, Rod, I got that wrong.
Nimrod
sorry.
Rosenstein.
Okay.
Yeah.
Take off the consulting. 1.3. Why are you paying consultants? And who are these consultants? 1.3 million. And then interest. There is no need to pay interest, as we're going to show in a later.
Who are they paying interest to?
On bank loans and stuff. There was no need to borrow the money because we've done the math. I've done the math on a monthly basis. I've got an estimate. They had no need to borrow the money. They'd already stolen 64 million.
Yeah, right.
If they merely used that money, they wouldn't have had to borrow 40 million.
That's crazy.
So the interest is not allowed. And these are the hard adjustments, okay, that you just take 43 million off. Then, and that gets you to 10 million of the core program service expenses. But of that 10 million, 7.2 million was for this endowment, and that was improperly calculated, that number. Take that off. So the real amount of money that they spent was for core programs was 3 million, but they claimed they spent 50, right? And this is the kind of stuff that, when you, it's just Charles and Jason getting together and, we got no referee, nobody, you'll say, God, Charles, that was a fantastic show. I said, but the artwork was even better. But if you have like referees and audience saying, no, guys, it sucked. Went on too long, it's too detailed, whatever. That's what an accountant's supposed to do. Stress test all the, all these numbers. Say, hey, why are you putting 1.5 million of travel on something that's supposed to just be in Little Rock? I mean, if you rented a private jet and had it fly around Little Rock, you could buy a private jet for that. What the hell are you guys? How can you be spending this kind of money on travel?
Yeah, why? If they're just supposed to be building the strip club library, why do they need to travel anywhere? And for $1.5 million, that's a lot of travel.
And why didn't Mueller, Comey, Rosenstein, and others notice this blatant fraud? The investigation was still going on at the time they were writing these numbers up. And by the way, this is, dare I say here, generous. This is overly fair to the Clinton Foundation. Okay, I could make a tougher argument that none of these expenses were justified. And these are just the program expenses. We're not talking about overhead here, fundraising expenses. We're talking about stuff they said they spent on the only authorized program they have, which is building a library, something they didn't do properly. Okay, so that's just 6% of the declared program expenses were actually legitimate, in my opinion.
Crazy.
Then you go to the next page. We do the same drill for 2005. There it's 6 rather. No, 5 here. This is 22 million of program expenses. Note how much they dropped, the declared ones. take off the Clinton Global Initiative GabFest and deal-making forum in New York for $8.3 million. And by the way, how the hell do you spend $8.3 million on a GabFest over a couple of days?
To be clear, that's a gala or a party or something?
No, it's a conference for 3 days, where 4 days where you come in and Bill gets up and says, I'm really happy to be here. And, you know, goes all...
I don't know anything about that.
Exactly. Here we're spending $3 million to travel.
But it's like a Javits Center kind of a thing.
Not Javits, like New York Hilton or something, but
wow,
still.
$8 million.
Yeah.
So a hotel ballroom kind of, I mean, even they're paying for everybody's hotel room,
No,
dinner,
not.
breakfast,
No.
lunch. How do you get to $8 million?
You don't.
Yeah.
And why does an accountant say, now wait a minute, you built the Presidential Library and Center, that's done. Okay, so you finished that, and you're a smart bunch of lawyers, and you know that the Articles of Incorporation have to be amended if you want to expand your purposes. The IRS tells you that, state law tells you that. Have you amended? Show me the amendment in the Articles of Incorporation that says you can have a members-only meeting in New York City
for $8 million
and spend $8.3 million on it. And who stress tested the 8.3? Was it that idiot Doug Band? You know, who writes the Doug Band memo? Yeah, it was.
I need to sample that Bill Clinton quote, I don't know anything about that, and just hit a button every time.
That's right. And yeah, last year we only spent, you know, $1.5 million on travel, but this year we're going to spend $3 million on travel.
Really?
Yeah, that's what it says. $3 million.
Oh, wow.
Take that off. Now, interest, again, you know.
Come on.
Right, we stole $64 million. We didn't need to borrow the money.
Can we stop on that travel number for a second?
Sure.
So first class ticket from New York to London, let's say, is $6,000, $7,000? How much is
Call
it?
it 10.
10,000. So I mean, how many people
That's
are?
a lot.
And that's round trip.
Right.
And then the hotel. I mean, $3 million. So Charles, you used to travel extensively in your work as what were you? An investment, whatever.
I was an investment banker. The most I ever spent on travel
in a year.
In a year was about $600,000
for you.
But I was
and
flying,
that was at the top level. You were on the Concorde.
Concorde. I once went on the Concorde 3 round trips in a week.
Right. So I mean, your travel was exceeding even some of the highest business executives, and you were 600,000. So 5 Charles Ortels in the height.
But I was trying to make money. These people are trying to steal money, right? They're succeeding at that, right?
So maybe it's a justified expense.
Right. So, I mean, I suppose you need your plane to haul around all the money that you steal from around the world and get it into different bank accounts. Then this interest. How do you spend $1.6 million on interest when you stole $64 million and you wouldn't have had to borrow that money in the first place, right? And then why are you renting an office? It's the first year after you built this trailer.
Wow.
And why are you spending $600,000?
That's a fancy office.
Yeah, why are you spending that money? And why are you paying consultants? And who are these consultants? $388 million.
Charles, I'm bad at math, but if $584,000 for an office in 1 year, they're paying $50,000 a month for the office?
Yeah.
What the hell office
in New York?
Is that? Well, that's believable at least,
but you're not allowed
that's
to.
a huge office.
Again, that's not the way this works. It's like, get the tax exemption for normal human beings. We're going to build a library and research center in Little Rock, which is why we need to spend $3 million on travel, $1.6 million on interest, and have an office in New York City. Because, you know,
I had a 1,200 square foot office in New York City that towards the end of our time there was $5,000 a month.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
I mean, you know, it's by square foot. So, I mean, that was years prior. That's a huge office.
I know. But wait, it gets worse.
Yeah.
So this is 22 million, and the real number should be like 7.8 million of what they spent, roughly. Go to the next one, because here's where it gets interesting. Okay, in 2006, this is a year where Hillary decides she needs to win re-election for the Senate.
Oh.
Okay? They spent 85 million. 31 million, the bulk of it goes for the Clinton-Bush-Katrina fund, something that they were not authorized to spend money on. Take that out. 16 million on consultants.
Ooh.
Who are these consultants, and how come their names aren't in the significant contractor list?
Why not just hire some of them?
No, but 16 million.
It's not in the significant contract. That's big.
Right, and then they chintz down on the CGI conference. This time they only spent 6.6 million on that. But travel, it goes from 1.5 to 3, now to 6.
Oh, it's absurd.
Okay, and they say out of all this, you know, a big braggadocio, fighting HIV/AIDS, getting drugs cheap, they spend 2.4 million on drugs. That's a pittance. You know, 85 million on programs, 2.4 million on drugs. Take that off because they weren't allowed to do that anyway. Now the occupancy rate is 2.2 million.
That's huge.
It's absurd. In 2006, what offices? They're paying for the campaign offices? Which
They
one?
opened up a Macy's.
I don't know. And then other, to the point now where they could say that other is 1.7 million. When you're rich enough, remember that the total authorized programs were 2 to 3 million when they were running the foundation in the beginning. Now by 2006, you're so rich you could say, well, I othered $1.87 million. It's ridiculous. And anyway, you put all this stuff together, the hard adjustments, I take 67 million off that number, and then you saw the schedule we did before. There's 7.1 million, in my view, of excess personnel costs. So really, they should have written off 10.9 million, in my view, as program service costs, and that's being very generous to the Clintons. I could come up.
What is that hard adjustments? All this stuff.
Yeah, these are all those added up. Yeah, these are actual lines in the tax forms or in the supplements to the tax forms, and then on top of this, there are lines in program expenses for employee costs. There are also lines in overhead, management general overhead for employees. I haven't touched that. I'm just focusing on fat in programs. Okay, go to the next page, please. 2007, just the high level stuff, 132 million goes down to 16.8 million. Okay, here travel is now up at 10 million. Occupancy is 3.7 million. Consulting fees are up at 10.7 million. Who authorized these consulting fees? Who were they paid to? And by the way, there's a section of the tax form, the 990, where you're supposed to lay out and break down your programs, your 3 largest programs. You're specifically required to do that. Do the Clintons do this? In none of the tax forms through 2007. 98, 2007, they say, yeah, no.
Three largest is strip clubs, blow, and travel.
Yeah, it's like, no, we're not going to do that. I'm Billy Boy. Hillary's going to be president. We don't do this kind of stuff. And then in addition, in all these 10 years of tax forms, you're supposed to list out your government grants. You're supposed to do it in total in the Clinton Foundation IRS forms, and then in specific terms in the New York and California filings. Do they do it in any year? No. And 2007 is significant because that form is filed in 2008 after Barack Obama is president. So he has to know, his people have to know by the early portion before he's sworn in that this is a massive fraud.
Charles, Always Well Said has a good suggestion to do some comparisons with other charity foundations and see with Dylan Reed, obviously not a charity, big, fancy, expensive company. Travel budget, 10 million?
That's absurd. No, and we have done such things in the past. It's a good suggestion. We'll do it in the future. This is off the charts, loony land stuff.
Right.
Okay, then, all right, so they come in 2008 form is filed in 2009, right? Barack is president. Everything cool. Right? He's not going to get in trouble. You got Lois Lerner in charge of the IRS, and they decide for the first time, with regard to 2008, that they're going to actually fill this Part 3, Line 4A out of the form properly, and they just say in 2008, in this form filled out in 2009, that they spent $141 million on the Clinton HIV/AIDS initiative.
It's crazy.
All right. They say they spent $18.8 million on the Clinton Global Initiative, and they spent $11 million on the Clinton Climate Initiative. Well, here are the problems with that, okay? On December 31st, 2009, so weeks after this form is filed, November 15th or so, 2009, weeks after that, they submit a form into the IRS and they say, we want to create Clinton Health Access Initiative, and it's not a successor to any previous operations. It's just out of the blue, something we just came up with.
Yeah.
Several weeks, 6 weeks after, they're submitting another form to the IRS saying, actually, 68% of our program expenses in 2008 were for this thing that has never formally been created, the Clinton HIV/AIDS Initiative. Notice it's not the Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS Initiative, Inc. period. It's a new name, the Clinton HIV/AIDS Initiative, never registered in any state properly. It's operating in 2008 from a Massachusetts headquarters where the authority to operate has been involuntarily revoked. And they put this form in, and Lois Lerner says, when can we go to dinner? I mean, it's like, no problems here. Yeah. I'm going to persecute the Tea Party. No problems with this. This
So
is
it's
just
really outrageous behavior.
And then in this is a new thing we can introduce to you: the annual report. This is the marketing brochure.
Oh, yeah.
Right. This says that these numbers are supposed to line up. If you go back, yeah, if you go back here, they say 141,440,670 for the Clinton HIV/AIDS initiative. In the annual report, they say no, it's 140,047. What's a million? And
Between friends.
Between friends. We'll just put that in other. Here they say only 18.8 on the Clinton Global Initiative. Here they say it's 19.6. Here they say the Clinton Climate Initiative is 11.1. Here they say it's 12.5.
Now,
just you see this as a numbers guy. These numbers should not be different by a penny.
That's what I was going to say, is that I think people watching see a million numbers on a page, and these are gigantic numbers. I don't appreciate the gravity of this. Shouldn't be a dollar difference.
Right, there should be no difference whatsoever. And the important thing also here is this Clinton Climate Initiative legally didn't exist anywhere.
Yeah.
Okay, so how are they declaring that they spent $11 million on something that doesn't exist legally? And then, by the way, included in this core program service expenses in the tax form, the IRS form, are the Clinton Hunter development and the Clinton Juicer Sustainable. This legally exists, Juicer in Canada, on the basis of false and materially misleading disclosures to Canada. Clinton Hunter development, as far as I can tell, has never lawfully been formed in any legal jurisdiction.
I haven't heard of that before.
That's the one. Yeah, that's the one in Malawi. We did that.
Hunter is the investment British guy.
Hunter is the guy who that decided he had an idea. Like they're no
I
sneaker.
want to get on in this theft too.
Yeah, there's no sneaker business out there dominated by Adidas and Reebok and Nike.
In Malawi.
No, in Scotland, in Glasgow, notorious center outside Glasgow for industry, right, where business conditions are so great that factories have been closing right or left forever. I'm going to set up a sneaker business out of the back of my van, and I'm going to be really rich doing that. And supposedly he did and succeeded. And then he made an announcement at one of these Clinton Global Initiatives that he was going to donate $100 million to the Clinton Foundation in like 2000. I forget what year it was, 5, 6, or something like that.
Why not?
And so the Queen, her people, they woke up at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and shook off the various alcohol effects. They said, $100 million, that's a lot of money. And so they said, well, knight that dude. So they knighted him. I think it was 6. They knighted him. And the fine print on that is that he did not say he would give $100 million cash. He said he'd give 10% of his future profits to the Clinton Foundation, which he estimated would be $100 million. And then we promptly had the crash, and he promptly couldn't honor the pledge, but he'd been knighted, is the way certain stories have come out about him. But this thing, so I used the annual report version to come up with 15,098 of core program services as contrasted to the 990 statement of total program service expenses. And I do the same thing for the following year, which is the last page, and go through the same sort of exercise, and it's the same damn story. I mean, this is we're now taking you through, high level stuff, really. I mean, you can go into even more detail looking at this by country and by state and many forms. This is a mess. They've never attempted to correct it because you can't correct it.
It's flowing through the ages.
Instead, what they did is, they waited till Obama got his Nobel Peace Prize and his cloak of invisibility. And they said, all right, the solution is we're just going to work on this for 2010 forward. Okay, forget all this stuff in the past. The past is the past. Who wants to look backwards? Let's look forwards.
Why dwell on the past?
Let bygones be bygones.
Yeah.
And so they want to shove all this stuff under the rug. But we're talking about a lot of money here. $900 million was sent towards a project that I argue should have cost $100 million. They never fixed any of their paperwork, and they can't say they're you and me. They're not, we're not lawyers. We would not necessarily know you had to do all this stuff. But the guy ran the goddamn country, and his wife expected to be given the job of running the country. They're both lawyers. He was a governor. He was an attorney general. She was one of the smartest women and lawyers in the world.
Yeah.
And she was intimately involved as a trustee from sometime, April or so, 2013, until September 2015, when she should have, all this stuff should have been fixed. Instead, they made it worse.
It's great.
So other than that, they did a great job.
Other than that, Mrs. Clinton, how did you like the play? Charles, it's astounding. I mean, I love it. You were just on a roll there. It's fraud through the ages for sure. I just don't understand how such a tremendous amount of evidence can exist over such a broad swath of financial crimes, and yet nothing has been done for so long. I mean, this is the essence of why all of this resistance is happening to Donald Trump. This is almost like the Ponzi scheme is, you know, they're sweeping it under the rug, and then now we're lifting up the rug, and it's like, what is all this?
It's fugly, is what it is. Now, actually, this for Kevin, I won't say his last name, but for Kevin out there, look at this, and for the numbers people, if you look at 162, 685, 368, that number is exactly 73%, you know, 73.00000% of this 222 number.
So what does that mean?
It means most likely it's just a forced number. Because this number is also 5.9 exactly. And I think what they were doing here is they needed in 2009 to arrive at a certain result in more detailed numbers that we're going to get to in another, and they just forced these numbers in here. These are not, accountants are supposed to, when you say you spent 162 million, and by the way, they say they spent 162 million, 685, 368 on the Clinton Health Access Initiative during 2009, 73% of the total. Clinton Health Access Initiative didn't come into existence until the 29th of September 2009. How do you spend 162 million in, you know, that short period of time? And what happened in the beginning of the year? What entity was existing? And how could you say in your Form 1023 for this that you're not a successor? I mean, it's just like, it's obvious that a decision was made by the Obama administration to say, you know, whether a gun was put to their head by the Clintons or they felt motivated to do it, a decision was made. We need to cover this fraud up. We have a midterm election coming in November of 2010. This form would have been filed right around then. We cannot let this fraud be known. Otherwise, the Tea Party people, who were persecuting, by the way, starting in March of 2010, they're going to be even more hot under the collar. So this is, you know, this is a gross miscarriage and maladministration of justice. It is well past time not only to expose the perpetrators of these frauds, but more important, as the Democrats are fond of saying about Nixon and Trump, the cover-up is worse than the crime. This thing has been covered up since November 16th, 2009 by Valerie Jarrett and Bruce Lindsay and Eric Holder and Lois Lerner and a whole bunch of people in the Department of Justice, the IRS, multiple state governments, multiple foreign governments. Every single one of those people who has been covering up this fraud needs to be exposed, if appropriate, indicted, prosecuted in a court of law, and convicted and be made to pay restitution, financial restitution, for the biggest set of unprosecuted charity frauds yet to date in human history. If we do not do this, then the people who might be tempted to go down this path, if they want a trailer park by some river in some state, they can do that. If they want to have a mansion in Beverly Hills, you know, call it a charity, fly around, spend all this money, hire your friends, whatever, no one's going to catch you. Look what the Clintons did. There are going to be people who will look at this and say, if the Clintons can do it for $3 billion, they declared, and hundreds of billions probably they haven't, let's go, let's be a trillionaire. Let's be the first trillionaire charity fraudster family.
Well, I wonder if that person might not be named Barack Obama,
right,
and he's already starting to attempt to do it. Charles, as you talk about this, it causes me to think about things that have been revealed to us by Harmon Wilfred, and it causes me to wonder if the cooperation between Herbert Walker Bush, one of my least favorite of all time guys, and Bubba Clinton, who, despite his nearly superhuman charismatic essence, is a despicable individual. I think this might be the piggy bank for every criminal covert operation of the past 30 years. And that's why all these guys are hovering around it, trying to protect it.
It could well be. It could well be. Because if you have something like this, that, you know, when you willingly suspend your natural cynicism and propensity to disbelieve somebody. When you do that, okay, you are a victim of the, perhaps a willing victim, but you're a victim of the fraudster mentality. The second they can get you to do that, and say, oh, come on, a former president, as bad as he is, he's learned his lessons, he lost his law license. He wouldn't, steal presidential records that were incriminating and operate a closed system with loyalists only.
Sandy Berger do it.
Yeah, well, not just that, and then have, this Hanging Gardens of Babylon, a 5,000 square foot penthouse, a catering facility. He wouldn't do that and use it as a gigantic money laundering enterprise to not only set up Chelsea and Mark Mezvinsky, who, you need to steal a lot of money because Mark Mezvinsky has evidenced an uncanny ability to burn money, and somebody's got to pay for Chelsea's bills, so you got to have a nest egg. I mean, this saga is a saga that the world really needs to understand. We need to recognize from future generations, when you see this behavior, you need to nip it off in the bud. You need to make sure that people like this are permanently barred from serving elective office, positions of trust. And we need to lay a marker down. You don't do what they did. And when you get caught, you pay dearly. Corinne Brown's in prison for 5 years for $800,000. Steve Stockman may go to prison for who knows how long, for about $1.2 million. Here we're talking about $3 billion. They can't get away with this.
And Charles, people in the comments, and I think even you were wondering when we put the graphic together, who is the man behind the curtain, the Wizard of Lies? I think we might be looking at him.
You're talking about Poppy?
He didn't spend the money on orthodonture.
He sure didn't.
Or dermatology.
You're right.
Oh, that's not a pretty picture.
Well, he is 95, isn't he?
This guy was disgusting when he was 2.
Yeah.
Don't like him at all.
Damn shame.
Whoa. Oh my, wow. That's funny, because first I was like, oh, he doesn't look that bad there. And I was like, oh wait, that's W. There's HW.
So that scene from the Seinfeld episode, right?
Yeah. I wonder if he's not, when you make a photocopy of a photocopy and it comes out a little crappier?
Yeah.
Anyway, Charles, it's been quite a show. Is there anything else we want to cover?
Just think we need to encourage the crowd. The crowd can do real service here. We're at a moment, the subscribers are growing. If you like this show and other shows, obviously support Jason's effort. But beyond that, refer this to your friends, refer this to journalists, send it, you can't fix stupid. And there are certain, when you realize you see somebody, a scruffy man, headphones, walking down the street, as a smartphone zombie. Yeah. No need to refer Sunday with Charles or Crowdsource the Truth to that, smartphone zombie who's probably, a faculty lounge lizard. I mean, you're not going to get anywhere with that person. But on the other hand, where people are scratching their heads, where people were negative about what Trump was doing and now they're seeing a personal benefit, encourage them to look at this, and circulate it. That could do a lot of good here, because if we can get the subscriber base through this election period where people are really going to care, more like 100,000, towards 100,000 or higher, then you're on a trajectory where a lot of people will be a lot better off because of that.
Yeah, I agree with you. And Charles, later this evening, actually just less than 1 hour from now, I'm going to be doing another one of our Only on Patreon shows. We've got a special presentation with Quinn Michaels.
Good.
He's discovered some unbelievable information within this My Friend Mr. Leakey book.
Oh, good.
And thank you for pointing out that Dr. Louis Leakey, who is a geneticist studying primates, who may in fact be related. Quinn feels that the book is almost a cipher encoding information in the book, and he's now found a number of individuals who were intelligence officers who then, like the guy who wrote Charlie and the Chocolate Factory was a Royal Air Force intelligence officer. And this Mr. Leakey book is the one and only children's book written by an incredibly high-level scientist. So there's these like strange anomalies in the profiles of the authors of these books. So I hope people will tune in at 6:30 only on Patreon. And of course, the shows I do with Quinn Michaels, people can watch either by supporting Quinn on patreon.com/Rahula Club or by supporting Crowdsource the Truth, patreon.com/Crowdsource the Truth. Charles, I want to thank you for joining me again. It's been another amazing Sunday with Charles. It's just the information is bulletproof, and no one's come up to say, oh, this was wrong.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity, Jason.
All right, I'll see you Wednesday. We'll be closing in then.
Looking forward.
Thank you, Charles. And thanks for watching, everybody.